Thank you, Dr. Gillum, for that introduction, and Caitlin for the invitation, Pastor Ed for the facilities. I know we're slated to go 4 hours today, so good luck, guys. Listening to me for 4 hours. My wife was rolling her eyes when I told her, yeah, I'm going to do 2 hours in the morning, 2 hours in the afternoon. She thought, who's going to listen to you for 4 hours? Thanks, babe. But hopefully it'll fly by, and hopefully you'll have some knowledge and understanding and some encouragement so that you can be healthy and go be who God made you to be. My whole goal today is to open your eyes a little bit to some knowledge that maybe you don't have. My people die from lack of knowledge, it says in Hosea. And so with some knowledge and understanding and support, you can go be healthy. We were designed to be healthy. We were designed to live. Why would God give us 80 years or 78 years or 90 years or however many years He's ordained for your life? Why would He give you this many years, but your physical health start to fail you and your mental health start to fail you? Average age 27 is where millennials' health curve starts to decline. I'll show you that slide later. That's a Blue Cross Blue Shield study from 2019. Millennials start to get sick on average at age 27, and it's a steep decline. That health curve should match your lifespan curve, and it doesn't, and it hasn't for about 100 years now. So anyways, that's the purpose today. Bring some knowledge and understanding, connect some dots so you can go steward your health, go be who you were made to be, who God designed you to be without having to worry about your health. The best way I think to do that is for me to tell my testimony first, share my story, and then we'll get into what I feel like God revealed to me was the basics. I call it the 4 pillars: nutrition, hydration, movement, and peace. The 4 pillars of health is what we term it. And if you can bring God food, not man food, into your body, clean, mineralized, natural water, structured water is the water that's found in nature. We'll talk about that. And get up and move a little bit every hour, but most importantly of all, be at peace. Then your physiology should function. And that sounds super simple. And the way Kaylin got better and these other patients Dr. Gillum sent and the 20,000 patients we've seen in 8 years, they didn't get better because I have some special potion or magic IV drip or supplement. I got to hit the easy button answer, which is, I actually don't know much about this body. It's so complicated. God designed it so amazingly. Let's just rely on His design to fix itself. Your body knows how to keep blood sugar normal all by itself without a pill or shot. Your body knows how to keep blood pressure normal all by itself without meds. Your body knows how to do everything all by itself if we just steward it. So let's dive in. I like to show this picture because Jamie, my wife, and she actually went to Tarleton for a year. A little connection here, and our 6 kiddos, because we're going to get into some what some people would call crazy talk or quackery. So I like to say I'm just a normal old guy. I grew up in Belton, Texas. My wife grew up in Turkey and Colorado, but we have 6 kids, live out in Idalou, outside Lubbock, and someone said, Doc, you're trying to convince people you're normal guy, but you have 6 kids. That's not normal, and you might want to skip that part. There's my diplomas, because everyone says, who are you? Are you a real doctor? Did you really graduate from medical school? But I went to Baylor undergrad, UT Houston Medical School, went back to Waco for residency, and I was chief resident there that last year. These are my granddads. I grew up watching these 2 guys be the town doctors. They did everything, delivered babies, set your broken bone, did surgeries, whatever you needed, they did it, cradle to grave. They were amazing. They had some amazing stories of making house calls way back in the day and delivering babies at the home. And this one story in particular, my dad's dad, which he's in the blue shirt there, he got called out to deliver a baby way out in the country. This kind of poor family, no air conditioning. This was back in the old days. And he said, Ben, I got in there and had my doctor bag, opened it up, got my sterile pack of my OB tools, my sterile OB obstetrical tools, spread it open right there on the bed. The lady was in labor and pushing, and all of a sudden a chicken flew through the window and landed right in the middle of his sterile OB pack. So these were old school doctors. But what I admired about them is they could take care of the whole family. I mean, literally from birthing you to the nursing home. And plus, they were just pillars of the community. And it just seemed like, man, they could impact a lot of lives and benefit a lot of people. So anyways, I wanted to be like my granddad. So I went out to Post, Texas, Garza County. They didn't have a doctor in the whole county, so God said go to Post, and we did, and it was great. I had a great 7 years there, doing conventional medicine, doing what I was trained to do, what Dr. Gillum was trained to do. And what I see now we were trained to do is treat a symptom. If you come in with high blood sugar, we're going to very quickly diagnose you type 2 diabetes and give you metformin and send you on your way. We might say try to eat better or something like that, but we got about 7 minutes to do that because that's your average primary care visit. Well, that high blood sugar is the smoke from a fire. And all you're doing is clearing the smoke. It's just like if you had a fire in your kitchen and smoke's starting to fill your living room and you go open all the windows and doors and turn on the fans to clear the smoke out so you can breathe a little better and see a little better, and that helps some. But if you just stay in that state, then diabetes will be a chronic progressive disease. That's from the American Diabetes Association website. Type 2 diabetes is a chronic progressive disease. Just like that fire will be a chronic progressive fire that will burn your house down and kill you if you don't go put the fire out. We don't just need to treat the smoke. So over time, what I learned was all this is smoke. High blood pressure is smoke. Migraines is smoke. PCOS is smoke. ADD is smoke. Alzheimer's is smoke. Cancer is smoke. Heart attacks are smoke. They're all the end result of disorder in the body. It manifests as inflammation. Go Google all those things I just listed, or any disease you have, or any symptom you have. Go Google it with the word inflammation, or go DuckDuckGo it with the word inflammation, and you'll see a connection. You'll see a million hits. I mean, everybody knows it. Well, the medical literature is clear. Doctors know this. Inflammation and autism. Inflammation and depression, inflammation and Alzheimer's. The brain is inflamed and it's manifesting with all these symptoms, and we label it with the disease name, but it's inflammation. It's all inflammation. Well, what's inflammation? We'll get into it deeper later, but it's disorder in the cell. That's it. Your cells have to make energy and clear exhaust, just like your vehicle. You put fuel, you put oxygen, and you put a spark plug, and combustion happens, and your car goes. And some black smoke comes out the tailpipe. That's your cell in a nutshell. You've got to make energy, clear exhaust, and if you don't do that well, you will be labeled with a disease, and you will get a drug that just treats the symptom. Back to Garza County, so I was there cranking through 40 patients a day, just like family practice docs in a small town have to do, because there's lots of Medicaid and Medicare, and they don't pay well. Insurance pays better, but if you have a lot of Medicaid and Medicare, you got to make that up with volume. So I became very good at volume. They even gave us tips in school on how to make a patient feel like you're in there for 15 minutes when you're really only in there for 7. Good eye contact, don't stare at your computer too long, a little pat on the knee, stuff like that. So I got good at that. And then I got good at legal double dipping, basically double coding. So if you came to see me for a migraine headache or diabetes or something, while I'm talking to you about your diabetes, let me check your skin for a mole I could cut off, or a sebaceous cyst to cut out, or an ingrown toenail to pull out, or check your ear for earwax that I could pick out. If I could do something with my hands, I get paid a lot more by the insurance companies. It's because the surgeons sit on the boards that determine the reimbursement rates, and surgeons use their hands. So in a practice like mine, I learned that, and I was taught that this is how you're going to keep your doors open. Before we got there, this clinic had a nurse practitioner a couple days a week, and they were losing $5,000 to $10,000 a month. The county taxing entity, the healthcare district, tax money was propping that clinic up. So when I came, they said, our goal is to get financially stable and profitable. And I said, well, that's probably not going to happen in this old rundown clinic that's super inefficient. Just the layout's inefficient, the internet's inefficient. I have to be super efficient to make money for y'all. Y'all need to build a new clinic. And they said, not a chance until you get us out of debt. So with the help of a great team, great nurses, great office staff, of course the community got behind us, lots of just support. It wasn't like it was just me. It was a team effort. But the biggest thing was the volume and the double billing on procedures, and we made money. So they built this brand new clinic right there on the highway. If you drive through Post, you'll see it across from the rodeo grounds. State-of-the-art clinic, digital x-ray, a lab. I mean, everything I wanted. I got to design it, and the county paid for it. Took out $1 million banknote from the local bank to build that. 1 year after we opened, that $1 million banknote was paid off. 1 year after that, there's $1 million sitting in the healthcare district's savings account because they're collecting taxes from the citizens for healthcare. But we were so efficient as a clinic, we were making money. We didn't need their tax money. And the reason, I'm not saying this to like say, wow, how great a business guy I am on conventional medicine. I'm setting the stage here. I'm living my dream, small town medicine, doing everything. So on top of the clinic, we were making house calls, Friday night football game, team doctor, nursing home, the county jail, all the small town stuff. Texas Monthly came and did an article because of this success, and then the Washington Post came and put us on, that's the front page of the Saturday newspaper. So we have fame, and then a TV producer from New York called after that Washington Post paper, and then they want to come do a reality TV show and follow us around. And I said, and the hospital was closed at this point, so there's no like ER, there's no OB, there's no like anything exciting. And they're like, well, I'm sure you got some characters in your town that are your patients, and we could follow them home and, you know, get into there. And my nurse was just saying, hang up, those New York City. But so fame, fortune, I was getting a good bonus, you know, production bonus check every quarter, especially flu season, those flu shots at production. So got the money, got the press, and I'm living my dream. I mean, by the world standards, I had it all. Everything's going great. The problem was, y'all just had to ruin it. Not y'all, but Americans were sick. All my patients were sick. So everything's perfect except the primary goal of people being well was not being accomplished. And it's not just this headline. I mean, they're all over the place. We're dead last. And that's what most Americans fail to realize is our healthcare system is not producing good results. And when I started digging into this, it kind of shocked me, especially, I mean, there's all kinds of headlines I'm not going to go through. When I started looking at the data, this is a chronic disease prevalence from just when my parents were born until 2020. I mean, hardly any chronic disease. Pre-World War II, we're the healthiest country in the world. That's not that long ago. And now we're dead last of all the industrialized countries. We come in dead last in all these categories. Here's that Blue Cross Blue Shield study I mentioned, age 27, decline starts. We shouldn't see health decline in our 20s, and we didn't used to see that. And this is a real busy graph, but the main point I want to highlight here, over here on the edge, 8 out of the top 10 conditions in these millennials have double-digit increases from just 2014 to 2017. So I'm telling you, your grandparents, or depending on how old you are, in the 1930s, 1940s, we're the healthiest, not much chronic disease at all. And now in this short period of time, we're massively diseased. We're coming in last place, but the kids, the rate of this disease coming in on kids is so fast that if you fast forward 20 years, it's not pretty. Here's sick kid studies. 1 out of 2.5 have allergies, 1 in 5 neurodevelopmental delay, 1 in 9 ADD, ADHD, 1 in 11 with asthma, 1 in 13 with severe food allergy, 1 in 20 under 5 years old with seizures, 1 in 36 with autism. 50%, it's actually 54% of kids have a chronic medical condition. God did not design our bodies to be this sick as kids. We are not stewarding our health. When I was born in the early 1970s, 1 out of 10,000, 1 in 59 is an old stat. I just mentioned 1 in 36. The kids in the U.S. are the sickest. Our infant mortality rate is the highest of any industrialized country. And I had someone raise their hand one time and said, well, that's because our neonatal ICU, we try to save these babies when they're born at 23 weeks, 24 weeks, they're super tiny. We'll pull those out, and we're still the worst infant mortality rate. CDC said a few years ago, the kids born after the year 2000 will be the first generation not to outlive their parents' lifespan. First time since the American Revolution, our kids are going to start dying younger. We're very obese. 42%. That's actually higher now. This is old data. It's 2016. And that's obese. If you add overweight to the obese, we're pushing 80% of the U.S. population is overweight or obese, when we didn't used to be. Cancer stats. 1950 until now, no real change in survival rates of cancer when we declared that war on cancer. 1 out of 2 men, 1 out of 2.5 women born after 1960 will have cancer in their lifetime. And the rates are expected to double by 2030. Here's autoimmune. In the 1960s, there was some. If you went further back, there was hardly any. And now autoimmune is skyrocketing. This is a lot of chronic disease. 2 to 50-fold increase in the past 30 years. That's just we'll talk COVID after lunch, but this got put into my previous presentation. I'll just mention, and y'all probably saw, COVID susceptibility. If you have chronic disease, you're more susceptible to COVID. 94% of people dying from COVID have one of these chronic diseases. There's a correlation. We'll get into that later. This is a real busy slide. We won't go through the whole thing, but here's the U.S. And what this is different health categories: life expectancy, infant mortality, percentage of the population over age 65 that have 2 or more chronic conditions, and obesity rates. And if you looked at all these columns, what you're going to find is the United States comes in worst of all those countries. Yet, we're spending the most money than any other country. Here's a graph that shows it. Here's the premiums going up, deductibles and premiums compared to earnings. If you're an employer, you understand this, how much you're having to put in. It's just going up and up and up. So we're spending lots of money, is the point of these slides. Here's one that compares performance to spending. Higher performance on this side, on this axis, spending out here. Here's the U.S. We spend the most, and we get the worst performance. So I'm trying to drive home a point. If you weren't aware when you walked in the door, now you are aware. We're super sick and getting sicker. Whatever we're doing is not working. It's actually getting worse, even though we're spending the most money doing it and going to the doctor a whole lot and giving lots of people insurance. Why? Dr. Gillum alluded to it. Here's my opinion, supported, I think, by lots of literature. Because doctors like Dr. Gillum and myself walk across that medical school stage, get our diploma and our white coat, and head out into the world to save the world and help everybody. And we go into med school with the right heart and the right motivation. Most of us do. And we want to go help y'all, help people, help patients, help sick people, help kids. But we walk across that stage thinking, being indoctrinated, that we just learned everything there is to know. The best of the best medical education in the whole world. We just learned it. Therefore, if there's something else out there that is claimed by somebody to be beneficial for your health, but I don't know it as a doctor that just graduated from the best medical school around, then that claim's false. Can't be. It's got to be quackery. It's got to be fake news. It's got to be false. I just learned it all. I just went to medical school. I've got the diploma. I've got the school debt. I've got the prestige and the white coat. I got the MD behind my name. My assumption was I just learned everything there was to help y'all get better. Now I know clearly what I learned was and was told is there's only 2 options. Option 1, ignore it. Ignore your migraine. Ignore your chest pain that's about to be a heart attack. Ignore that lump in your wherever that's going to grow into, metastatic cancer. Just ignore it and suffer. Have high blood pressure, have high blood sugar. That's an option. You don't have to go to the doctor. Or option 2, treat the symptom, which I already alluded to. The high blood pressure, that's a symptom. High blood sugar, that's a symptom. We'll talk about root cause in a minute. But that's it. I learned option 1 and option 2. That's all I learned. And the reason I have a flat tire here is to drive home a point. One day, my wife, Jamie, had a slow leak in her tire on her Suburban. And it was real slow, so it wasn't like totally flat. I noticed, it's getting a little low. I was too busy, so I just put some air in it and told her it was fine. And like 5 days later, she's back with, look at that tire's still getting low, Ben. Okay, I've aired it up again. And I just kept airing it up every 5 days for many weeks. And it was fine. It was convenient, cheap, and easy. I didn't have to think about it. Air's cheap, boom. Got it done. She could still get the kids to where they needed to go and go to the grocery store and get her stuff done. No big deal, right? But if you're a mechanic, you'll understand this way better than what I'm about to explain because I'm not a mechanic. But I'm sure having a tire that had that slow leak for 5 days messed up the alignment and the shocks and the struts and put more pressure on the other tires, increased her risk for a rollout or a blowout and a rollover or an accident. And all. There are all these unintended potential consequences that I didn't think about, I didn't consider by just doing the quick fix, the easy symptomatic fix. Obviously, this is a super simple example. I should have just fixed the hole in the tire and been done. It takes a little more effort, a little more time, but it's the right thing to do, and then you don't worry about it. I'm telling y'all, and hopefully by the end of these talks, you'll firmly believe this is exactly what U.S. medicine does, Western medicine does. We are putting air in the tire, and then we have to keep going back to put air in the tire over and over and over. And what does that do over time? Decrease life expectancy, increased unintended consequences, and death. And that's what all those statistics I just showed you bear out. Medical school. The way I sleep at night and live with myself and just our culture is I just tell myself, well, some group of somebody's got together, back in the 40s or 50s and just decided Americans just aren't gonna change their diet and lifestyle. They're not gonna quit sitting all day. They're not gonna quit smoking. They're not gonna quit eating sugar. They're not gonna quit stressing. Therefore, because those are all the root causes, since they're not gonna address the root cause, we'll just come up with the pharmaceutical and surgical-based approach for symptomatic care. But now we're so far down the road, we've got a generation of people that don't even understand and are totally clueless that there's a root cause and we could address that, including the doctors who are graduating out of medical school don't understand this. So how did I get to the understanding? Divine appointment. God, I believe, ordained and lined up a meeting with a nurse practitioner that was my employee in post at Garza County. He had celiac disease, which is when you react to gluten and your gut gets inflamed and you bleed and you bloat and you have pain and all that. So you avoid gluten. So that's what he was doing. He was avoiding gluten, had been for 10 plus years. He'd been diagnosed a long time ago. Whenever the drug reps would bring in something with gluten, he just wouldn't eat it. And then he was at a bed and breakfast one weekend with his wife just for a getaway. And he told the lady at the bed and breakfast he needed a gluten-free pancake because he has celiac. And she said, okay, we'll do that for you, but there's a doctor here that could help you with that and cure you of that. And you don't cure celiac. You don't cure anything. We manage disease. You don't cure type 2 diabetes. You manage it. You manage your hypertension. You manage your reflux. You manage your arthritis. You manage everything. Anyways, my nurse prac rolled his eyes and thought, you're crazy. But the lady persisted, and the doctor was right there in the bed and breakfast. So to be polite, I think, and get the lady to leave him alone, he said, okay, let me talk to this guy. And the doctor proceeded to explain to my nurse practitioner that God designed the body a certain way, and if you line up with God's original intent, then the body should function. Diseases are consequences. They're not really diseases, they're just consequences. And he went on to spend 4 hours with my nurse prac teaching him lots of stuff in that 4 hours. And my nurse prac got convinced, went and implemented what he advised in the diet and lifestyle changes. And over 2 to 3 or 4 months, he got better. And he came to me. He didn't tell me any of this initially until he was healed and better. And he came to me and said, "Doc, I think I'm cured of celiac." And I literally laughed and told him to get back to work. He got a little offended. And I'm like, "You don't cure celiac. I mean, maybe you're in a little tiny remission or something, whatever. But you eat gluten. If you eat a bunch of gluten, it's going to come back." And he went straight to the break room, and he got a breakfast burrito that the drug rep had brought that morning. He started eating it with the tortilla. That afternoon, he ran over to Holly's, the hamburger joint in town, ate a hamburger, and then he ate a Slayton Bakery thumbprint cookie that the drug reps brought that afternoon. And if he had had one bite of one of those things previous to this, he would have been sicker than a dog and in the bathroom all afternoon and probably called in sick the next day. And he was totally fine. Worked that afternoon, came in the next day, he's fine. And I'd seen pre and post. I mean, I knew how he reacted to gluten before. So, and he was so convinced, obviously, because not only was his gut better, and I'm not saying if he ate like that every day, a burrito like that, and a hamburger like that, and a cookie like that every day, and he started stressing more, and he didn't do all the things that he was, then yeah, I'd come back. So he's not really cured, whatever. If you bring order, your symptoms should improve and go away. If you allow disorder, then the symptoms come back. It's that simple. So I felt morally and ethically obligated to call the doctor and ask what he did, because for my next celiac patient, I thought I should give him the option. Medical school taught me to tell you to be gluten-free the rest of your life, so go do that. That's option 1. Option 2, you might try whatever my nurse practitioner tried. Maybe it'll work for you, maybe it won't. I have no idea, but I feel like I just felt obligated to at least give him the option. So I called the doctor up. We talked a few times, and I really couldn't go along with what he was saying. Like, if there's a doctor here listening that has no clue about functional medicine, which Mark Hyman at Cleveland Clinic said, 20 years from now, all doctors will practice this way. Get to the root of it and fix it. Cleveland Clinic believes it. A lot of people believe it. More and more doctors are going this way. But if you're a conventionally trained doctor and you've never heard of this, they'd really be kind of laughing, rolling their eyes, maybe walking out even right now. And that's so I was doing that. When I was called this doctor, I'm like, no way. You are crazy. You're a quack. You're nuts. I was polite, but I'm like, inside, I'm thinking, you're so crazy. Because he said, "Ben, there's no such thing as diseases." And I immediately grabbed my appointment, my schedule for the day that my nurses had printed out and the 40 patients I just saw, and I just went right down the list. I'm like, oh yeah, there's diabetes, there's rheumatoid arthritis, there's ulcerative colitis, blah, blah, blah. I just went down, and he said, nope. If you weren't born with it, it's a consequence. It's not a disease. And then, he just went on to just say a lot of stuff. And it was a year, one of the toughest years of my life, wrestling with this. How could this be? This can't be. No way. But he kept sending me articles and books and things to read, and I was busy and seeing 40 patients a day, and I told him, I don't have time for all this. Can't you just send me one nice, clean summary article or book that summarizes all this alternative medicine? And he said, alternative? What do you mean alternative? I'm like, it's kind of quackery stuff, holistic, whatever you do. And he said, okay, next time you're going to build an addition at your new clinic, are you going to call an engineer or an alternative engineer to design it? Next time you get on an airplane, you going to go with the alternative aviation guys or the aviation guys? They're the mechanic. Next time your car's not working, you go into the alternative mechanic or the mechanic. And his point was, there's natural laws God put into the earth. Everybody has to live by them. The law of gravity, the law of aerodynamics, the law of internal combustion. All mechanics have to follow the same law because that's just how things work. And he explained the body is the same way. Your body's designed to function normally. And if you give it what it needs and avoid what it doesn't, it will do that. Just like your car. The guy that built your car up in Detroit, he put a little book in the glove box to give you some pointers on how to maintain that amazing design and piece of construction. Change the oil, rotate the tires, do this, this, and this, and it should function. And you would expect as a consumer not to be in the garage with the mechanic having to work on it all the time, right? We get it. We totally get it with our vehicles. Not that we all maintain our vehicles like we should, but at least we understand, yeah, that's just the truth. That's just how it works. It's the same with the body. And it is not our genes. We'll move into epigenetics here. Cancer and heart disease are neck and neck for the top killers in America. And this, I know it's small print, I'll read it to you, only 5 to 10% of all cancers can be attributed to genetic defects. If you polled Americans right now and asked them, where's cancer come from? Oh, bad genes. 5% of them, yeah. But 95% of them have their roots in environment and lifestyle. That's the truth. And that, if you don't understand that, and you just try to chase the gene theory, just like we're chasing the germ theory with COVID, we'll get into that this afternoon, then you should expect, if that gene theory is wrong, you should expect poor outcomes. Here's a study from 2004, some Australians. They want to see how much, for cancer therapy, how much does chemotherapy contribute to the overall survival? The overall contribution of curative and adjuvant cytotoxic chemotherapy to 5-year survival in adults was estimated to be 2.3% in Australia, 2.1% in the United States. And we continue to do the same thing over and over and over, although our results are not good. This article came out last year. Cancer death rates post biggest 1-year drop ever. When you dive into that article, guess what caused the biggest drop? They attributed it to 2 things. One, smoking has gone down significantly. That's one of the diet and lifestyle factors. Number 2, immunotherapy. Some doctors have got off of the cytotoxic chemotherapy road that gives you the 2.1% benefit and have actually started trying to work on drugs that stimulate your own immune system to go recognize the cancer and kill it like it's designed to do. Your immune system's not doing that. If you have cancer, by default, automatically that means your immune system's dysfunctional. Our immune system's designed to recognize and then take out the cancer. And so immunotherapy was the other thing that contributed to that. Use your own God-given immune system. Heart attacks, number 1 killer, 80%, and that's conservative. I think it's more like 95%. Diet and lifestyle related. The first heart attack ever recorded in the United States of America is 1912, and there was one heart attack in the medical literature in the United States. And now 650,000 people are going to die from heart disease this year. Dr. Chris Knobbe, Knobbe, ophthalmologist, UT Southwestern. Not anymore. He quit his job when he figured out, through searching the medical literature and discovering that fact, that there was one heart attack in 1912. And he dug into that and figured out it's the vegetable oils. The polyunsaturated, the PUFAs, polyunsaturated fatty acids, the one with the heart healthy stamp on it, is causing the inflammation leading to atherosclerosis and the heart attack. And I would challenge any cardiologist to look at Dr. Knobbe's work and bring some literature that refutes it. You won't find it. He's right, in my opinion, but the literature strongly supports it. So what did Dr. Knobbe do? He's an ophthalmologist, because guess what? The same thing that causes the heart attacks causes the number 1 cause of blindness, age-related macular degeneration. Happens to also be the number 1 cause of cancer and every other disease. It's the things that drive inflammation that cause all these diseases. It may manifest as blindness or heart attack, and we don't know why. I have a theory on that we'll get into during our spiritual talk, during the peace talk. But the point is, Knobbe saw the literature, and was just blown away. All this inflammation is coming from the diet, and particularly these highly oxidizable vegetable oils. And he told me, he said, Ben, I quit my clinical practice as an ophthalmologist because I just wanted to go teach and spread the message to all the doctors in the world. And I thought I would be asked to come and present at every major ophthalmology conference in the world. That was in 2005. Guess how many invitations he's had? None. So, if heart attacks are diet and lifestyle related, would you expect a stent and a bypass surgery to prevent future heart attacks? Well, if you're not going to address the root cause, you should probably not expect for those things to prevent a future heart attack. And that's what the medical literature shows clearly. Your cardiologist may not have shared this with you, but future heart attacks are not prevented by putting in a stent. Now, if you're in the middle of a heart attack, right this minute you're having an acute myocardial infarction, you can get to the hospital and get it opened up, yes, it will save your life in that acute emergency situation. Most stents are put in because you're out mowing your lawn and you get some chest tightness, and then you sit down and drink a glass of water and cool off, and it kind of goes away. And then a few days later, you're carrying in groceries for your wife and going up a few steps, and you get chest pressure and tightness again and some shortness of breath. You get a little sweaty, and you sit down and rest and calm down, and it kind of eases up. And then you go do something else, and this recurrent, and then you go to your doctor and you tell him these stories, and he goes, ooh, that sounds like angina. Let's do a stress test, and your stress test is positive. Ooh, let's do an angiogram. Yep, you got 80% blockage in your LAD. Let's put a stent in. That's the majority of stents and bypasses, not having an active acute heart attack. So they studied this, and the study showed that doesn't really work. Compared to medications, it's the exact same. So this study, which was in 2007, basically made stents contraindicated unless you're having an acute heart attack. Now, what this first study in 2007 did say was it will relieve chest pain. If you go put a stent in and then you go mow your lawn, you won't have the chest pain. So then they did another study. This was in 2017, and they compared the relief of the chest pain and heart attacks, both medications alone versus doing a stent or a bypass. It failed to ease the chest pain any better than medications do. What I'm trying to drive home is we are treating the very end product of an inflammatory process right when the bomb's going off instead of getting far enough upstream to get to the root of the inflammation. We could spend 2 hours on cholesterol, but I'm not going to. But get this book. If you're on a statin and you have heart attacks in your family history or whatever, it was on this previous slide. Fat and cholesterol don't cause heart attacks. I'm going to quote from the back of this book. The co-director of the Framingham study, doctors know what the Framingham study is because it's the most probably widely quoted study from Framingham, Massachusetts. They followed the whole community, like 30,000 people for 30 years. The co-director of the study, George Mann, talking about the cholesterol heart attack hypothesis, theory, it's a theory. The greatest, quote, the greatest scientific deception of this century, perhaps of any century. That's the co-director of Framingham saying the data from the study does not say saturated fat and cholesterol causes heart attacks. Real quick tangent on that because it's important. It's the number one killer in America. 1955, 56, President Eisenhower had a heart attack. He was in Denver, Colorado. They put him in the hospital. They didn't know what to do. They gave him saltine crackers and bed rest. And the doctor there called back to D.C. to Eisenhower's doctor and says, hey, what should we do? I don't really see many of these in my practice. This is a cardiologist. He didn't see many heart attacks. And they didn't really know what to do, and they called Ansel Keys. Ansel Keys was a nutritionist, and he developed the K rations in World War II. And so he's kind of a national hero because of his development of the K rations, feed the soldiers, help win the war. And so they asked Ansel, what do you think? And he said, saturated fat and cholesterol from the diet, go low fat, eat low fat. He got put on the cover of Time magazine in, I think, 1960 or 61. Everybody went that direction. except a few scientists who decided to do some studies to try to see if he was right or wrong, and all the subsequent studies says you're not right. But the study he quoted from, and the reason everyone went that way, it's called the 7 Countries Study. And you can go look it up. And he put out this graph that showed this direct line, a linear correlation. Countries that eat the most saturated fat have the most heart attacks. And he published that. And it was fraudulent because he had a preconceived notion and a bias and an ulterior motive. We all have biases. I have a bias. My bias is God created us perfectly. He gave us cholesterol for a reason. And when you eat less cholesterol because somebody told you to, your liver goes, whoa, we don't have enough cholesterol. And your liver starts to kick up production. Your body wants cholesterol, needs cholesterol. What's the problem with cholesterol is when it gets, hopefully y'all can chime in now, inflamed. Inflamed cholesterol is a problem. I had a patient just this week, healthy as can be, works out good, eats good, moves good, hydrates well, peace is pretty good, like knocking out of the park 4 pillars wise, and she's coming to see us. Why are you coming to see us? And she's like 60-something. She's like, my energy just is tanked. I know I'm 60, but I take care of myself, and I just can't, I should be able to keep up, and I can't. And brain fog in my muscles. I'm like, when did this start? Well, about a year ago. We timeline everybody on when did things start. Well, what happened a year ago? What trauma in your life, or just what events or what thing? And well, my doctor said my cholesterol is high, so he put me on a statin. Oh, I could tell you the number of stories like that. LDL in a woman is not predictive of heart attacks, of future heart attacks. Total cholesterol and LDL are not predictive. HDL and triglyceride, the ratio of those two, and the ratio of 2 to 1 or better, 2 being the triglyceride, 1 being the, so like if your triglycerides, lady, are 100 and your HDL is 50, that's 2 to 1. Beautiful. If it's even better than that, like 90 on triglycerides and 55 or 60 on HDL, even more beautiful. And if your total cholesterol and LDL are through the roof and flagged as high, it's not predictive of heart attacks. And what we did with this lady is, and I would say all doctors should be doing, is when you get your cholesterol panel, ask for an oxidized LDL. Oxy, O-X-Y, LDL. And that will measure, is your LDL inflamed or oxidized? And if it is, that's a problem. Work on the inflammation. If you just put on a statin, it will lower your LDL, and it deals with inflammation a little bit. Statins have been shown to decrease future heart attacks by 1%. Maybe I'll get to the slide that shows a newspaper article with a famous guy on it, and in big letters, 36% reduction of heart attacks with Lipitor when it first came out. But there's an asterisk next to that 36%, and you go down and read that fine print, it says, in a study of however many people on the placebo, 3% of the people on placebo had a heart attack, and 2% of the people on Lipitor had a heart attack. I know I'm just from Belton, Texas, but the math I learned, that's a reduction of 1%. So how they get 36% from 1%? And I can't wait to see the vaccine data on these new vaccines coming out, where they get the 90-95. That's another story. They do statistical gymnastics, absolute risk versus relative risk. There's a book called The Statin Disaster. If you're on a statin, if you have high cholesterol, you think this high cholesterol, it's an issue for you, get Statin Disaster, read it, and have your cardiologist read it. But what I'm getting at, that 1% drop, because it did drop 1%, 3% to 2%. It's the anti-inflammatory effect of the statin. So we don't want inflamed LDL, but statins just drop your LDL. They don't really work on the inflammation that good, and therefore you don't reduce the risk of future heart attack and stroke that much at all. So get an oxidized LDL, and then here's a second little thing, and this is known in the medical literature. LDL comes in either big fluffy LDL or small dense LDL. And your cholesterol panel, when you go to your doctor and he just checks a regular old cholesterol panel, it's just LDL. It doesn't go to that breakdown of, is it the big fluffy or is it the small dense? Big fluffy LDL, think of it like a soft cotton ball just rolling down your arteries, wiping the wall of your arteries smooth and clean and keeping it nice and good. That's big fluffy LDL, and that's good. Small dense LDL, think of it like a little BB just banging around, going down the artery, scraping the walls, scraping the epithelium, initiating the inflammatory process that becomes down the road a problem. Small dense LDL. This lady that I was telling you about, her oxy LDL was normal, and all her LDL was big and fluffy, and I told her, according to the medical literature, I don't care that your LDL is 160 or 180 or whatever, because it's big and fluffy and beneficial for you. So there's a deeper level of understanding. The problem is to go from small dense to big fluffy healthy, and to go from oxidized LDL to not oxidized LDL, there's no pill for this. You have to change that. You have to eat food that doesn't drive inflammation, and you have to drink liquids that don't drive inflammation, and you need to get up and move instead of sit all day. Sitting's the new smoking, you may have heard. It drives inflammation, and fight or flight mode, stress, drives inflammation. This article came out August, just a few months ago. The Journal of the American College of Cardiology. It's a review article. A review article means the authors went and scoured the literature and looked at lots of good studies, high-quality studies, and summarized them for you. It's really cool. I love review articles. And this isn't the first review article. There's multiple review articles like this. And let me read it to you. There is no robust evidence that current population-wide arbitrary upper limits on saturated fat consumption in the United States will prevent cardiovascular disease or reduce mortality. How many people in America think they're not supposed to eat red meat, dark chocolate, and full fat? I had coffee this morning, and half of it was coffee, and the other half was full fat, heavy whipping cream. But look a little closer here. Current evidence base. This is, again, American College of Cardiology. Health effects of saturated fatty acids depend on the interacting effects from naturally occurring food components and from unhealthy compounds introduced by processing. Translation: God food is fine and healthy. When man puts his hand to it and processes it and does stuff to it, there's where the potential issue comes in. And I'm not saying you can't eat any man food or that all man food's corrupted, but at least you need to be much more diligent in your investigation of this food you're about to put in your kid's mouth or your grandkid's mouth or your mouth. If a man touched it and did something to it, did he do it for the benefit of your cellular health, make energy, clear exhaust, your mitochondrial health, or did he do it for another reason? And 99.999999% of the time, food is processed for a reason that's not beneficial to your health. It's more convenient, and it's cheaper, and it's easier, and you don't have to think as much about it, but it drives inflammation. Diabetes. The American Diabetes Association. Diabetes is not a choice. And further on it says it's a chronic progressive disease. And here's Jason Fung. Type 2 diabetes is a curable dietary disease. American Diabetes Association. Diabetes is not a choice. It's a chronic progressive disease. Jason Fung. I mean, there's a major difference here. Interesting thing about Dr. Fung, who's a nephrologist in Toronto, nephrologists don't see diabetics until the diabetics have been diabetic for so long and their blood sugar's been out of control for so long that their kidneys are shot and they need dialysis. That's who Dr. Fung gets to see. And I would encourage you, if you have diabetes, to go read Dr. Fung's book. Another little story. Our clinic is membership-based. The only way to see 5 patients a day and spend an hour to 2 hours with them, you can't do that in a regular setting. You can't do that in an insurance-based model that I've been able to figure out. So we don't do that because we want to teach you how to be well and never need a doctor. So it's a membership model. We see 5 patients a day instead of 4. But with COVID hitting Lubbock, we opened up to non-members. If you're sick and you have COVID, come on in, we'll see you. So I had a lady, sweet little lady, 51 years old, with obesity. She was about 300 pounds. Obesity, diabetes, rheumatoid arthritis, and a couple other things. I'm supposed to be in acute care conventional mode. We're trying to help the community. Let's see all these COVID patients because no other doctors will, apparently. Not no other doctors, but a lot aren't, unfortunately. We'll talk about that later. So it's supposed to be a 5-minute visit. Hydroxychloroquine, zinc, azithromycin. Get out the door, take some cod liver oil and some vitamin C. See you later. If you get worse, come back and we'll do some other stuff. I couldn't help myself. I got my whiteboard that's behind that wall. It was in my office. I'm like, do you mind if, real quick, we talk about your diabetes? Because this is a high-risk lady. She's over 50 years old, has multiple medical problems, obesity and diabetes being the top ones. And I said, look, let me just show you real quick. Insulin resistance, which is the cause of type 2 diabetes, and how to fix that. Drew it all out and told her, go look up Dr. Fung and start fasting. Cut your carbs, cut your sugar, increase your fat, and start fasting. Narrow your eating window. Don't eat over a 16-hour from morning till midnight. Narrow it. Get to 12 hours, get to 10, get to 8 hours, and then skip a meal. That's called intermittent fasting. It's what Dr. Fung talks about. That's the summary of his book. It's how you reverse insulin resistance. But here's the point of the story. That lady's eyes lit up, and she said, my sister gave me that book like a year ago, and I read it, and I did it. And I lost a lot of weight. I forget how much. Significant, like over 50 pounds. But she said, my blood sugars went from the 400s to 90s. And I went to my doctor, my endocrinologist, and told him, or he said, what are you doing? She said, I've lost weight. I feel better. My sugars have dropped from 400 to 90. And he said, what are you doing? She said, I'm fasting. Well, you can't do that. You're diabetic. Oh, that is the disconnect we have. I'm telling you guys, medical school is 2 years of this right here. Some guy in a white coat who's very prestigious and has lots of fame and fortune is preaching to the students, and students are memorizing and writing things down for the test every, 6-8 weeks. You regurgitate all that back on the test, and hopefully you passed, and you just do that for 2 years. You drink all this like a fire hydrant, drink all this information in. And then the second 2 years, you're in the hospital walking around as the youngest man or woman on the totem pole of all these older medical students and residents and fellows and attending physicians. Is packed, this team of white coats walking around these teaching hospitals. And that's where you learn to be a doctor. And you have your little notebook and you just listen and watch and you do what the older doctors tell you to do. If someone comes in with chest pain, you're going to run an EKG, you're going to maybe give them an aspirin, do a chest x-ray, and blah, blah, blah. It's cookbook protocol, boom, boom, boom. You do these 8 steps. If someone has a headache, okay, well, ask a few questions. Is it a tension, like a rubber band around your whole head? Or is it more pressure right here and worse when you bend over? Is it like an ice pick only on one side, like in your eye, and the lights make it worse and you get nauseated? You're asking these questions because you're trying to classify that headache as migraine headache, tension headache, sinus headache, or there's cluster headache. That's about the 4 headaches. And that's it. There are some others, but basically that's it. Because all we're trying to do and what we're taught in med school is to classify that symptom into a diagnosis, a label. Because once you have your label, your diagnosis, you're done. You have a little book that has drugs in it that match. You match this drug, you get Imitrex for migraines, you get ibuprofen for tension headache, you get something else for the... It's a matching game. I had a little old lady come in when I was in post, still doing conventional medicine, didn't have a clue about root cause medication or medicine. Friday afternoon, 4:30, I'm trying to get out of there. It's Friday afternoon. I want to get home, the football game that night. little old 70-year-old ladies that walk in without an appointment, Dr. Gillum will tell you, that's automatically ding, 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 probably going to be a problem, especially when you're in post and there's no hospital. You're the ER basically. And she walks in with chest pain. I'm like, great. Chest pain. So I'm already thinking, well, we'll get the EKG, and I mean, she's old and she's a woman, and sometimes you can miss it on those, so probably we're just going to have to send her to Lubbock. But, highly trained doctor that I am, I started asking her questions pretty quick. Tell me about this pain. Describe it to me. Is it kind of like a pressure and like an elephant sitting on your chest, kind of radiating to your left arm and your jaw, and it gets worse when you're active and trying to like carry in a load of groceries, and it gets better when you sit down and rest, and you get a little sweaty? Is it like that? Or is it more like in the middle of your chest coming, radiating up to your throat, and more of a burning, not a pressure, and it's better if you drink some milk or take a Mylanta, and worse when you eat spicy food? And she's like, that one. I'm like, oh, whew, okay. It's GERD. It's reflux. I mean, that took like 2 minutes. And I'm like, all right, I can still get to the football game. And I've got my prescription pad, and she's kind of talking. I'm looking, nodding my head. Here you go. Here's some Prilosec or whatever I gave her. And I'm handing her the prescription, and I'm thinking, I'm out of here, scot-free. And she said, Doc, I'm not taking that. You're just treating my symptom. And I think I laughed. But I was bewildered. I mean, y'all totally get that as common sense people. Doctors have oftentimes lost the common sense. I didn't know what she was talking about. She said, you're just treating my symptom. And I said, no, you have a disease. I'm sorry, you have reflux. You have too much stomach acid. And, here's a treatment for it. And she just was like being pretty persistent. Nope, I'm not taking that, Doc. And I kind of knew her a little bit to be kind of an herbalist kind of lady, that she likes all natural stuff. And I thought she'd just be a little belligerent. I said, ma'am, I'm sorry, but there's only 2 options. You can either suffer every night when you lay down, have this heartburn, and you won't sleep good, and suffer, or you can take the medicine and be good, be all right, not suffer. She said, nope. So then I tried to scare her into it. I said, well, if you go long enough with this acid up in your esophagus, you can get esophageal cancer. You don't want that, which, you can. You don't want acid in your esophagus. It will increase your risk for esophageal cancer. But she's like, no, I'm not taking it. So then I went biblical on her. I said, ma'am, I'm sorry, but Adam and Eve in the garden, they disobeyed, they went their own way, got out from God's authority, and they introduced death and dying and disease and all that. It's the way it is. It's a fallen world. Lucky for you, God gave doctors these minds and brains and these pharmaceutical companies intelligence to develop these medicines to help you. Please. And she's like, nope, I'm not buying it. And I was done at that point. And I just stuffed that prescription in her purse. And I said, you don't have to fill it. I can't make you go fill it, but this is your disease, GERD, gastroesophageal reflux disease, GERD, D's for disease. It's your disease. This is a treatment. See ya. And I don't know why, out of the millions of visits in Post, Texas, God brought that memory back to me later on once I learned and I read this book, which if you have reflux, and maybe if we have time we'll get into this, Jonathan Wright, Why Stomach Acid is Good for You. This is a skinny little large print. It's for lay people. I read this book, blew me away. And what blew me away was I got convicted because I was lying to patients out of ignorance, so I didn't know I was lying. I didn't have the truth in me. I had a half-truth in me because I was taught a half-truth. And what I was taught and what I told patients that had reflux is, you're making too much stomach acid. And that's why you have heartburn. And that's what the commercials say. It's probably what, not Dr. Gillum, but other doctors, if you see, might say. Go read the book. I can't resist. In a nutshell, God's mechanism to keep that acid down here in your stomach instead of coming up to your throat where it's never supposed to be, the mechanism for that valve, because there's a valve between your stomach and your esophagus, that valve to squeeze shut tight and stay shut and keep the acid down where it's supposed to be, is all related to having a pH of 1 to 2 in your stomach. Battery acid is 1.5 pH. Super, super, super acidic. When you do things to not steward your health the right way, not take care of that automobile, shiny automobile they just built you out of Detroit, when you don't follow that manual and do things the right way, your stomach acid producing cells get sluggish or just turn off. If you're in fight or flight mode, half of them turn off. And your pH starts to rise because you're not making enough stomach acid. And your pH gets to a 3 or 4 or 5. Still acidic, but not acidic enough to trigger all the mechanisms to make this valve stay tight, and that valve gets loose, weak. And the acid comes up and burns you. And you take a Prilosec, Nexium, Zantac, and all that, and it shuts down the stomach acid production so much that you're just not making enough to even give you heartburn anymore. Jonathan Wright, Stomach Acid is Good for You. Read it, and it'll explain all that. And to drive the point home, I had a patient in Post when I first moved there. When Shane and I graduated, he came up here. I went out there. It's a horse trainer, real nice guy. One of my first patients, and he came in with heartburn. Man, this is an easy one. Because when you're first coming out of school, you're a little nervous, especially when you're out in the wilds of West Texas and there's no other doctor in the county. And I said, oh, no problem. He's on Zantac, over-the-counter Zantac. I said, no problem, just double it. That'll work. So he did. He doubled it, and it worked. But like 6 months later, he came back because it quit working. I said, okay, we'll just do a prescription. I think I gave him Nexium. And it worked for like a year, and then he came back and said, it's not working, doc. I'm like, okay, well, just throw a little Zantac with the Nexium, like combine them. That'll be fine. And that worked for like a year. Then he came back. He's like, doc, it's not working anymore. I'm like, well, just double your Nexium. Take one in the morning, one at night. And that worked for like a year, and you see the pattern. After 7 years, I had this guy on Nexium twice a day, and he's real he doesn't ever want to go to the gastroenterologist or Lubbock or see any specialist. He just wants to get back to the ranch and work. So I had him on Nexium twice a day, trying to manage this thing, Zantac twice a day, and Carafate twice a day, triple therapy twice a day. And he comes back, it's not working, doc. I'm like, Jeff, you've got to go to the gastroenterologist. I don't have anything else I can do for you. So he goes, they do a scope, everything looked pretty much fine, little gastritis. And they put him on Dexilant, which at the time was pretty brand new. It's like a high-powered Nexium. And he came back and it was working. Okay, good, I learned a new thing, Dexilant. Well, 6 months after that, he's back. He's like, doc, it's not working. I'm like, don't tell me, go tell your stomach doctor in Lubbock. But he had heard that doc just learned some new stuff. This is right when I was learning root cause medicine. And I just read this book, and I'd just been to Dr. Wright's conference. And this patient came in, and I'm like, I hate to break it to you, but if this guy's right, and he's a pretty old doctor, and he's super smart, and the book sure makes common sense, I think maybe we've been doing the exact opposite. I think you need to stop those acid reducers, and then we need to increase your acid production so we can get your pH super acidic, and then maybe that valve will close on you. And he's like, I'm all in. I don't have anything else to lose. This isn't working. There's nothing else to do. So I'm like, okay, well, and he said, how do you increase your acid production? Got to quit stressing. So when you're in stress mode, God did not design us to be in stress mode for very long, fight or flight mode. So the body can work in one of two ways. That's Topo Chico, not Sprite. The autopilot system, so you have the autonomic nervous system, ANS. Think of it as autopilot, though. Autopilot nervous system. It runs all these parts of you that you don't think about. Like when I just thought I need a drink, that's voluntary. This muscle's moving because I'm telling it to move. But you have an involuntary system, like my heart's beating right now. And I'm digesting that heavy whipping cream. And these things in the body, my immune system's monitoring for COVID and gobbling it up if there's any in here. There's automatic autopilot. So that system can run in sympathetic mode or parasympathetic mode. Parasympathetic, some people call it rest and digest. I call it peace mode. P for peace and P for parasympathetic. Then the sympathetic mode is stress, fight or flight. That's it. One of two modes. When you think about back in the day, well, way back in the day, Adam and Eve in the garden before the fall, they're in peace mode all the time. The lions and lambs laying down with each other. There was nothing to fear. Post-fall, though, fear, the spirit of fear, which is from the kingdom of darkness, and the most repeated verse in the book of truth, the Bible, is do not fear or fear not, or some version of don't fear. And what is this country under right now? We have submitted, not all of us, but most of us, submitted to a demonic spirit of fear. But when we do that, we go into fight or flight mode. We're not designed to be in fight or flight mode except for that just, you're walking down the trail, say 500 years ago, all you got to do is food, shelter, and, just go about your business, grow some food or go hunting. Say you're going down the trail and all of a sudden a mountain lion jumps across the trail, you go into fight or flight mode. Your flexor muscles tense, your pupils dilate, your heart rate goes up, you breathe a little more, and you shunt your blood to your muscles and your organs like your heart that need to be ready to fight or run. That's fight or flight. So what do you not need to worry about during fight or flight mode? You don't need to worry about digesting your last meal. So the gastrointestinal system, your digestive system, including your stomach acid, dials down, way down. The second system you don't need to worry about in that moment when you're trying to fight a mountain lion is your immune system. You don't need to worry about trying to kill COVID in that 5 minutes when you're trying to kill a lion. So the immune system goes offline or turns way down. White blood cell production goes down. Third system, hormones. Had a patient yesterday. Very irregular menstrual cycles, super heavy bleeding, can't get pregnant, can't sleep, lots of anxiety. All those are classic signs of low or no progesterone. Progesterone is the pro-life hormone that allows implantation and brings structure and order to the womb. When you're in fight or flight mode, you steal, you rob from progesterone to feed cortisol and adrenaline, your adrenal hormones. Because all these hormones come from the same cholesterol molecule. Cholesterol gets turned into the next thing that turns into the next thing that branches to all these hormones. And when you're in fight or flight mode, you shunt over here to all your stress hormones and you shut down all the other hormones like sex hormones like progesterone. So your hormone system, your digestive system, and your immune system all turn down when you're in fight or flight mode. Guess what the three systems are most commonly in the patients that come see us? Their complaints are related to one of those three systems or all of them. Autoimmune disease, GI disease, ulcerative colitis, Crohn's, IBS, reflux, and just hormone dysregulation. We're not supposed to be in fight or flight mode. So I told the guy, back to the cowboy, you got to quit stressing. And you got to quit sugar and processed grains. Because a high sugar diet turns off those acid pumps also. And when I say processed grains, I'm talking man food, not God food. God made wheat called einkorn wheat. It's 4 foot, 5 foot tall. Has 14 chromosomes. Man took that wheat and hybridized, and big hybridization, 1972, I think, Norman Borlaug, he won the Nobel Prize because he changed, a huge change in God's wheat, hybridized it to dwarf wheat, 18 inches tall, wind resistant, drought resistant, yields tenfold higher than God wheat. He cured world hunger because of this massive output of wheat production, and that's why he won the Nobel Prize. Well, we didn't know that then, and we know now. When he made those modifications to increase yields, it changed the starch content of that wheat and the gluten content. Today's modern wheat has 46 chromosomes instead of 14 chromosomes. And all this new genetic information codes for gluten proteins that are totally different than the ancient wheat, einkorn flour. That's what we use. We make biscuits and gravy and pies and cookies and cupcakes, not all the time. But when we do, we use God wheat, not man wheat. Different gluten, different starch content. 2 pieces of whole wheat bread of modern man wheat. 2 pieces of whole wheat bread, William Davis Wheat Belly. He put those 2 pieces on the back of this book to remind the readers that when you eat 2 pieces of healthy whole wheat, in quotes, you're going to raise your blood sugar as fast as a can of soda because of the way the starch is different in modern wheat. That's Wheat Belly, William Davis. So, back to the guy. He wants to fix the problem because the symptomatic management of just taking Nexium and Prilosec and Dexilant and all that, it's not working. So because his back's up against the wall, he's suffering and hurting, he's exhausted all his Band-Aid therapies, there's nothing more to do but suffer, he decided to submit to stewardship of his health. Because it's hard in post-Texas to say no to sugar and processed grains and to not stress. But he was committed, motivated, and driven to do it, so he did it. We did give him a temporary supplement that helps turn on those stomach acid cells too. But you can't just do it with supplement. You cannot supplement your way to health. You have to get to the diet and lifestyle, mainly the stress. And in 30 days, he comes back off his meds. Remember, this is 7 years of doing nothing but increasing these meds. In 30 days, he's off his meds, no reflux at all. And the side effect to this treatment plan? He lost 10 pounds, which he needed to lose. His blood pressure normalized, his anxiety went away, and he starts sleeping all night. And his joints feel better. You can't fix, which obviously I didn't fix it, but he can't fix just reflux. If you bring order to the body, then all the different parts should start to work. And all the diseases, like conventionally minded, I would have diagnosed him with anxiety, generalized anxiety disorder, insomnia, osteoarthritis, gastroesophageal reflux disease. I probably could have come up with 1 or 2 more. And his medical record and his insurance would have him diagnosed and labeled with all those things. And all those things were smoke from a fire that was raging because he was eating man food and he was stressed out and he was drinking a ton of Dr. Pepper too. Sugar, sugar, sugar. Sugar and stress. Sugar and processed grains and stress. It was amazing. It blew me away. So that's when I got in trouble. Word got out. Doc's learning some different stuff. And when this guy gets better, he's going to go tell the whole town. So now people are coming in, hey, Doc, can you help me with X, Y, or Z? I'm like, I can't really. I can teach you some basic little bit that I know. You have to go do it, though. But what I was doing in the 7-minute visit, I'd get a piece of paper, draw a line down the middle, and I would say, okay, for whatever symptom you're complaining of right now, here's a conventional answer. Now, if you want to try to get to the root cause, here's some basic stuff I'd write down for him. And then I hand him the paper and say, go think about it. If you feel convicted to go down this road, then call and make a follow-up appointment for 1 hour. Because it'll take me at least an hour to teach you and really explain all the stuff on this side if you want to go that way. Well, enough people started calling back to the front desk, to my office people, saying, I need it. Doc said, give me an hour. And I knew this potential would be for this. So I went to my office manager and said, I know we're like knocking it out of the park, like our clinics, we were in a group of 50 different clinics around Lubbock, and ours, not being prideful, but y'all saw from earlier, we just had good numbers. And I told my office manager, our numbers, if we go this route, our numbers are going to go down. The money's going to not be there. We're going to go back into the red. And we need to let the board know. I'm not going to advertise this. I'm not going to promote it. At the time, that's how I was thinking. I was trying to ride the fence, and I was still under this demonic spirit of man-pleasing and spirit of performance and spirit of mammon. But I tried to ride the fence, and I told my office manager, let's try. Give a few 1-hour visits, maybe one day a week. Somehow we can do both. Tried to work it out. Bottom line, sure, don't need to tell you the whole story. It didn't work out. It couldn't work out. And so they decided they needed to bring in a doctor who could run them through like cattle. They asked me to leave. I called my wife, said, meet me this on Friday afternoon. Said, meet me at the clinic with the trailer and then the truck where we got to be up by Monday. That was the beginning of me stepping into who God made me to be. God made me to be the Latin root of physician is teacher. And it started to become more and more and more clear. I'm supposed to go teach the truth and let people, those who have ears to hear, they'll walk in the truth, they'll get better, and they won't need a doctor. Why was I not doing that before? The world. The systems of the world, influenced by the ruler of this world, the father of all lies, is behind all these systems. So I learned half-truths. I learned how to treat a symptom. I learned suffer or treat a symptom. I didn't learn root cause. I didn't learn how to fix it. I didn't actually believe that God designed us this way. So God called me out of that, or forced me. I tell some of these doctors that call me and they're thinking about going this way voluntarily. I'm like, man, y'all are bigger than I am. I was forced to go this way. But what was keeping me back was the culture, the education, the systems of the world, but also in my own thoughts. I thought I had to keep everybody happy. I had to be the small town country doctor. If my family was going to love me, my granddads, I had to be like them and blah, blah, blah. All that was a lie. But I was walking under a thought that was not the truth. And we'll get into that in this afternoon with the spiritual talk, the peace pillar. Let's keep going. I just got to show you this and then we'll get going. This is from Mayo Clinic. So, if Dr. Fung's right, and diabetes is a curable dietary disease, which I didn't finish that quote, the cure for type 2 diabetes is to lower insulin, not to lower blood sugar. Let me drive this home real quick. Say you're a farmer out in the field and you're on your tractor and you're plowing and you're doing your thing and your disc or what, I'm not a farmer. Dr. Gillum can get up here and tell this story better. But your tractor breaks down, you hop off and you're fixing it and something falls and slices your leg open. You got a gaping wound now and it gets grease and dirt and it's dirty and you're a tough old farmer and you just kind of brush it off, wrap it up and keep going. Get into the house that night. You don't really tell your wife about it. You kind of clean it out, but not really. And it just sits there for a few days and then it starts to get a little pussy and then it gets real pussy and then your whole leg turns red and then you're running a fever of 102.5. And you finally tell your wife about it, and she runs to the medicine cabinet and gets some Tylenol and Motrin. You start alternating every 2 hours, Tylenol, Motrin, and you get that 102.5 down to 98.6. And you say, I'm good to go. Just keep coming with the Tylenol and Motrin, right? Of course not. We all know he's got gangrene. He's getting septic. That infection's going throughout his body. The number on the thermometer, 102.5, that's the warning light on your dashboard going off. Something's wrong under the hood, go fix it. You just suppress that number with Advil and Tylenol, you're going to miss the root cause and you're going to die. Diabetes will be a chronic progressive disease that kills you if you treat it that way. And that's what we do. Metformin and glyburide and all the drugs and whatever new drugs are out, I don't know because we don't use them because we don't need to. I'm not anti-drug to be anti-drug. We use them last resort. If you can't address your diet and lifestyle or you try and it just doesn't work or whatever, conventional medicine is great for trauma and emergencies and for people who can't or don't or won't address the root cause. But if you do address the gangrene, the temperature comes down all by itself and you're done. Same with this. You address the insulin resistance, the temperature, the high blood sugar that you're poking your finger and your glucometer is telling you you're 180, that's temperature. That's warning light. Address the insulin resistance. So if the American Diabetes Association is correct, and it's a chronic progressive disease, and it's not a choice, and Dr. Fung is wrong, then you would expect this study. This is Dr. Montori, Victor Montori, Mayo Clinic, Rochester, Minnesota. He asked the question, does controlling your sugars reduce the risk of complications of diabetes? So does using Tylenol and Motrin and keeping your temperature down reduce death from gangrene? I would suspect no. And it's the same thing with this study. Does just lowering the blood sugar only with drugs reduce the complication rate, which is dialysis and amputation and heart attack and stroke? And the study said no, it doesn't. So let's get into epigenetics real quick above the genes. I'm going to go a little faster now. I've been telling you all so many stories. It's not your genes. Yes, genes play a part. Genes are there. Your dad had Alzheimer's. Your granddad has Alzheimer's. You know, you're scared you're going to have Alzheimer's. Well, you have a genetic predisposition. Genes are just books on a bookshelf full of information. There's lots of it, lots of information in the books. But the librarian, you must request the librarian to go to the second shelf on the third bookcase, go to the fourth book on the shelf, open it to page 34, read paragraph 2, and I will do what that says. The instruction to the librarian to go grab what gene and what page and open it up and do all that's genetic expression. You're in charge of that. It doesn't matter if you've had 5 generations of Alzheimer's. You can change the signal of what gene's going to be read or not read. Here's the agouti gene. The agouti mouse is this big fat yellow mouse. They've bred this mouse to be obese and have diabetes with this agouti gene. The agouti gene makes you fat, a fat mouse, and yellow fur instead of brown fur. So they gave the mama mouse some B vitamins, just B vitamins, in her rat chow before she conceived. And then she had babies. And the babies were normal, brown fur and skinny. You look in the genes of this baby, the agouti gene is there, but it's turned off. Something about the B vitamins turned it off. Prostate cancer, Dean Ornish, UCLA, multiple other studies have replicated this. He took prostate cancer, some guys with prostate cancer, did a biopsy of their prostate, got the cancer cell, looked at it, looked at the genes, and you can see what genes are expressed or not expressed. I'll say turned on or not turned on. The cancer grow gene, prostate cancer grow gene was flipped on with these guys. The cancer suppressor gene that suppresses cancer was turned off. He put them through maybe 6 months of diet and stress management, went back and did another biopsy and saw the cancer grow gene had flipped off and the cancer suppressor gene had flipped on. And their PSA was normal, the blood test for prostate cancer. Here's the Pima Indians, Southeast Arizona, pre-World War II, 0% of their tribe had diabetes, and now 50% of their tribe has diabetes. Same gene pool, same genes didn't change. Their diet and their lifestyle changed. Netflix, I think it's off there now, maybe. But anyways, Magic Pill, it's a documentary. The one part of it's a great documentary, but the one part I'm going to highlight is Aborigines in Australia have heart disease, heart failure, diabetes, obesity. They have Western diseases in one generation. And the government was pouring all these millions of dollars in to try to fix the problem. And then this young couple on the documentary moved in, put these Aborigines through boot camp, 2 weeks or something, and all they did was teach them how to cook and eat like their parents and grandparents did before them. And their diseases went away. It wasn't their genes. Longevity plan, Dr. Day, cardiologist from Utah. He was in his mid-40s, and he was sick. He was on 8 prescription medications for arthritis and depression and all kinds of stuff, hypertension, and I forget what all. Dr. Day speaks Chinese. He went to China. He gave a lecture to the cardiologists in China about something, cardiology-wise, pharmaceutical, I'm sure, or stents. But the Chinese doctors noted, you're overweight and you're pretty sick looking, and they got to talking, and he was explaining his conditions and whatever, and they said, you need to go study the people in this village in China. It's called the Longevity Village, is the nickname. It's the bluest of the blue zones. So blue zones are these areas in the world where per capita there's more centurions, more people live to be 100 in these certain pockets around the world, and this one is the bluest. So he went and interviewed all these guys and watched them and how they live, what they eat, what they drink, blah, blah, blah. He documented all that. He talked to one guy, a rice farmer, out in the field, working in the rice field. And the guy said, I feel like I'm in my prime. And he was 112 years old. But he went further. Dr. Day took this further, and he drew their blood, and he looked for the genes that we know predispose to Alzheimer's and cancer and heart attack and stroke. They had the genes, and they did not manifest the diseases. Nutrition, physical degeneration. Dr. Weston A. Price, dentist, Cleveland, 1920-something. He starts to notice a slight uptick in heart attacks and cancer and cavities. And he told his wife, we need to go set sail around the world and find people that are not seeing an uptick. Remember, the first heart attack in America is 1912. He's in the 1920s saying, let's go find some people that aren't having heart attacks. He spent the next 20 years sailing around the world. He went north to Canada to some Native Americans, lived in their village for like a year. Then he went to Alaska, some Eskimos, went across the Pacific into the Orient, and then down to the South Pacific Islanders. And then he went to South America, the Amazon rainforest, across the Atlantic to Switzerland and some places there in Europe, and then went to Africa. 14 different people groups over 20 years. He would live with them for a whole year or more, document with photography and just written accounts of what they ate. And he noted a pattern all throughout. Like in Switzerland, there was a village up in the Swiss Alps. He said these people are so healthy, so uniformly fit, and just perfect jaw structure, wide jaws, perfect dental, no cavities, perfect teeth. They didn't brush their teeth. Strong. He said 100 pounds in their right hand, 100 pounds in their left hand, and 100 pounds in their teeth they would carry. Strong, fit, healthy, no malignancies, no heart disease, no cavities, and no tuberculosis. In the village right down the road that was closer to the ocean, that had access to the ships coming in with processed white flour and sugar introduced into the diet by either being close to a port or where a Western missionary moved into a village and brought white flour and sugar. These groups, within one generation, cavities, dental arches got more narrow, crowding of the teeth, malignancies, heart disease, cancer, and they're dying from tuberculosis. Just from those two things is what he noted. He called it modern food versus ancestral food. And the Africans, like the Maasai tribe, were eating only milk from a cow, blood from a cow, and meat from a cow. Pretty much was their whole diet. But then the guys in the Amazon were eating a lot of plants and some fish from the river. And of course, the Eskimos were eating mostly whale stuff and a few berries in the summer. The point is, every group was eating something different. Some was high-fat, low-carb. Some was medium carb. And some was more plant-based. Some was all animals. None of them were exclusively plant-based. Very, very interesting findings. Highly recommend the book if you're super interested, because it's a really thick, heavy read. It's just his research all put into a book, but it's really fascinating. But the point is, again, it's not your genes. People are dying from tuberculosis and starting to have heart attacks and cancer from processed grain and sugar, and they weren't getting enough saturated fat. Measles, mortality, United States, 1900, 1904, 1908. You see lots of measles infant mortality, and then it comes down. 99% drop before the vaccine came in 1963. How did that happen? They didn't submit to the germ theory. They submitted to the terrain theory. They cleaned up the terrain. Most of these outbreaks were in these industrialized turn-of-the-century cities. Hard for us to imagine, unless you've maybe been international travel, but like imagine New York City with no sewage or clean water, really, infrastructure, horse poop everywhere, mud, mosquitoes, and all the food's being grown far away, not in the city. They're not getting quality, nutritious, fresh food. The cows that they were milking were in the slop in the city, and so the milk was not great. They cleaned all that up. Once they cleaned up the sanitation and got more nourishment, good nourishment in, the body's immune system works better and dealt with this, and people weren't dying. Sitting's the new smoking. I won't go through this right now too much. Cancer, type 2 diabetes, cardiovascular disease, back pain. All of that increases just from sitting all day. Last Child in the Woods is a great book about being outside. So many studies on just being outside where you can look at green stuff, plants, grass, hear birds chirping, look at animals, be in God's creation, decreases risk of all sorts of diseases. Circadian rhythm or circadian code, Satya Panda, what he showed in this book was now that we have modern rhythms because of electricity, we get up with an alarm clock, we stay up stay up way past sunset. Our ability to eat and I guess be stressed and sit and do all the negative diet and lifestyle things expanded. We do that for 18 hours now. And just narrowing your window down, mainly eating is what he's getting after. If you just narrow that window in this study on rats, an 8-hour window versus random eating. So these rats could eat anytime they wanted versus the other group of rats could only eat in an 8-hour window. Same food and same amount of food, same calories, all that was the same. It's just the window. Healthy versus all these diseases. Just from narrowing the window a little bit. Instead of grazing all day long. America today, we're the first culture in the world to never fast, to have an opportunity to eat 24/7 all the time. It's so convenient and cheap. A third of all your genes are affected by this rhythm. You wouldn't think something as simple as get your eating in, don't even change your eating, just get it in 10 hours. Just narrow it down and quit sitting so much and get outside a little bit into nature. That's what these last 3 slides just said. Just get outside, don't sit, and narrow your window. And you're going to dramatically reduce your risk of lots of things. Okay, we'll end on this, or break for lunch. Microbiome. I didn't even know what this was when I was in medical school back here in 2000, and we graduated 2002. There was 2 studies, the first 2 studies ever with the word microbiome. And then it ballooned, of course, in 2015, it's up to over 2,000. Microbiome is just the word for all the bugs that live in us and on us. So around 2000, the Human Genome Project released all its data. We thought genes were the answer to everything. We were going to study the human genes, label all the genes, connect them to all the diseases, come up with drugs to manipulate it. We'd all be, disease-free. We knew fruit flies had like 20,000 genes and earthworms had like 18,000 genes or something like that. And we thought, we're going to have like 200,000 genes because we're way more evolved than an earthworm. And it turns out we only had 25,000 genes. They were shocked. How could we have so few genes? And the next shocking thing was 90% of the DNA that they found in these samples taken from these young, healthy people was not human DNA. They were studying the Human Genome Project. They needed human DNA to count our genes. That 90% was the microbiome. You have 300-something trillion viruses in you. 30 trillion different bacteria in you. You're really not you, you're us. It's all these bugs live in us and on us, and they all play a role in our body. I don't have it on a slide, but I heard a doctor the other day give a lecture. There is one particular species of bacteria, moms, if you're pregnant, right before you give birth, like in that last month, a signal is sent from your baby growing in your womb. A hormonal signal is sent out from your womb, and it goes to your colon, and it recruits one of your immune system cells, a white blood cell, to go engulf and gobble up one particular strain of good gut bacteria, calls that bacteria to it, grabs it, doesn't destroy it, takes it up through the lymphatic system, and dumps it into mom's mammary ducts, into the milk. Baby's born, colostrum comes, breast milk comes, you feed that baby, and if it's a girl, they showed that this bacteria that just got introduced through mom's breast milk from mom's colon that the baby called forth decreases the risk of that girl having breast cancer 25 years down the road. That's one bacteria out of countless. We don't even begin to understand the complexity of God's amazing design. And your average American has so decimated all these good critters in our gut because of antibiotic-laden food. 80% of antibiotics made in America are not given out by your pharmacists. They're put into the food and the meat and the milk. All that antibiotic kills your flora. Stress kills your flora. High sugar diets kill your flora. Chemical-laden foods kills your flora. We need diversity of flora. Your average American's in the 500 to 1,000 species. Went to Africa, the scientists went to Africa and looked at one of these native tribes, 30,000 different species of bacteria. And of each species, they have millions and billions. We're down to like 500. We need to be at 30,000. Here's what just a few of them do. These, I'm not going to try to pronounce them, F, L, V, and R. These are 4 different bacteria. This study shows kids that have lower levels of these increase their risk of asthma. Something about these 4 bacteria, talk to your immune system and say, hey, calm down and don't get overly exaggerated in the lungs of these kids. Here's one, this doctor in Australia took this one strain of bacteria and he gave it to these kids with severe peanut allergies, and this is like EpiPen severe, and they resolved their peanut allergies. He gave it in combination with something else too, but the main thing in his conclusion was it was mainly this bacteria. This bacteria is associated with an increased number. It hyperstimulates the immune system, and an overactive immune system could attack your own self. And in this study, this one is associated with multiple sclerosis. When your immune system attacks your own myelin sheath, the insulation on the nerves, it's called MS. And the interesting thing also about this study was they looked at India, where they don't have hardly any MS, and they looked at their fecal matter, which is 2/3 of a stool is bacteria. But they studied their bacteria of their gut. And then they watched immigrants from India to the United States, and they watched them over years. They lived in America. Their microbiome shifted to American microbiome, and their MS rates went up to American rates. Just from I'm sure there's multi-factors, but this study was looking at this bacteria. This one, Oxalobacter forminges, if you don't have enough of those, you get more kidney stones. This one is skin cancer, bifidobacteria, and melanoma. That's the deadly skin cancer. They put the bacteria in, the skin cancer went away. They pulled the bacteria out, the skin cancer grew back and forth. And this is eczema, there's anxiety and depression, chronic fatigue, your appetite, all these different bacteria associated with all these different symptoms and problems and diseases. It's fascinating stuff. Are we almost at noon? Yep. All right. So, the goal this morning was to, if you're brand new to this thought of that our healthcare system's really not good, and we get horrible results, we spend the most money, we're treating symptoms only. I mean, hopefully you can start to see that. And if you choose to treat a symptom only, that's fine with me. I mean, not really, because I want you to be well and go be who God made you to be. And when you're too chronically fatigued, brain fogged, in pain, or going to the doctor all the time and spend all your money and resources on that system, that's not really okay. But I'm all about informed consent. What really I'm most passionate about is teaching that there's 3 options. And then you can choose. You can decide and pick. But to not even know this and to be walking under this deception that our bodies were so poorly designed, disease is normal. It's normal to be on prescription drugs by the time you're 27. It's normal to have multiple diagnoses by the time you're 50. It's normal to be suffering the whole last half of your life. It's not normal. That's a lie from the enemy. And so we need to address that with the truth. And if you have ears to hear, in the path that God has for you, walk that truth out, however that looks for you. It's not a step 1, 2, 3. Stop eating sugar, stop eating grain, do step 1, 2, and 3 that Dr. Edwards said, and you'll be well. Nope. Every day it seems like we get a question. Do you treat MS? Do you treat this? Do you treat that? No, we don't treat any of that. Let's flip it upside down. We don't treat smoke. All we're going to do is teach and support you in trying to bring the 4 pillars into your life. And then your body will do the doctoring. Your body will take the order that you're bringing to it, and it'll fix itself. So people need to know this. That's why I come give these talks, and y'all share this with your friends and everyone you can, because everyone needs to know this, especially in this day and age. When we come back from lunch, we'll talk a little bit more on nutrition, touch on hydration a skosh, and then we're going to dive deeper into the peace pillar, which is directly related to truth versus lies. It's not about stress management. It's not about trying to control all your circumstances to make life easy and stress-free. That's all a half-truth. I'm not saying don't bring some order to your circumstances as best you can, but you can't totally control your circumstances, obviously. It's about our goggles that we're wearing. It's the interpretation of this life that's coming at us. Are we looking at it from a heavenly point of view, the truth, God's point of view, or are we looking at it from our point of view as human beings, corruptible and influenced by the enemy, the father of all lies? So our thoughts play a huge role. Thank you all for coming back. I'm going to try not to go too long so we'll have time for Q&A at the end, and try to do some COVID stuff too before we get to Q&A. Nutrition, hydration, movement, and peace. That's what we try to focus on. So I'm going to hit just real quick on nutrition. Dr. Gillen mentioned we didn't get much in med school. I kind of remembered about 2 hours worth of nutrition in 4 years of medical school. So doctors don't really know anything about nutrition unless they go and learn it elsewhere. Dr. Linus Pauling, 2-time Nobel Prize winner, said, you can trace almost every sickness, every disease, and every ailment to a mineral deficiency. And I would agree with that. I didn't learn that in medical school, though. And there's this Dr. Jerry Tennant. He's actually up in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. Ophthalmologist, graduated from Harvard early, I think when he was like 19, 18, something like that. Super smart guy. Invented the LASIK laser for the LASIK eye surgery. Pretty smart dude. He got sick, really sick, and it was, now he knows it was from when he was burning through the cornea. There's smoke actually that gets created during that surgery, and he was breathing in that smoke, day after day, year after year. He got viral encephalitis, inflammation of his brain from a virus being in his brain from that smoke. Went to all the different top neurologists at Harvard and Mayo and Hopkins, and they all said the same thing, just go home, get on disability. And he didn't accept that. He went to some holistic doctor, I think in Arizona or Mexico, but he got better. But in that healing journey, kind of what he concluded was if you could get one cell to work right, then they would all work right. If you can nourish this cell and give it what it needs. And so that was pretty fascinating when I first heard him talk. It's so simple, but it works. So, in a nutshell, based off what Dr. Jerry Tennant teaches, you need raw materials. I mean, kind of like the automobile analogy I keep going back to. Imagine up in Detroit, there's a factory that make automobiles. What do they need to make an automobile? They need the raw materials coming in. But you don't just need raw materials. You need the workers to assemble those raw materials into the end product, your automobile. But you don't just need workers. Those workers need energy to be able to do the work. So it's really those three things: raw materials, workers, and the energy to do the work, and you will make a cell that works right. You do not have the same cells, eyeball cells, skin cells, liver cells. All the cells in you right now that make up your body are not the same cells you were born with. Your cells die all the time, and you make new ones all the time. So the rods and cones, these cells in the back of your eyeball, they die every 48 hours, and you make new rods and cones. The lining of your gut about every 4 days, your skin every 4 weeks, your liver every 8 weeks. You're making a whole new you all the time. It's amazing. but you need raw materials. You need workers and you need energy. The workers in the human body are called enzymes. Enzymes, it's not just digestive enzymes. I mean, that's one type of enzyme, break down your food. But the enzymes I'm talking about are actually like cholesterol, mentioned earlier. Cholesterol turns into the different hormones, turns into vitamin D, which is actually a hormone, not a vitamin. But how does cholesterol, so the sun hits your skin and it triggers a chemical reaction in the skin to change the cholesterol in your skin into vitamin D. Well, there's an enzyme that's actually cleaving, chopping off a portion of that cholesterol molecule. And now it's a different molecule. It's not cholesterol anymore. It's a hormone called vitamin D. Well, that enzyme that does that physical cleaving relies on magnesium, the mineral magnesium. And if you're magnesium deficient, that enzyme's not going to be very efficient, not be able to cleave that cholesterol and have vitamin D. So a lot of this vitamin D deficiency, it's a sunshine deficiency and a magnesium deficiency. If you give the body what it needs, it will make what it needs to make. But we're very mineral deficient. Magnesium, out of the 9,000 enzymes in the body that are constantly working, cleaving, adding, doing all the work, assembling that automobile, out of the 9,000, about 3,700 of them rely on magnesium. And magnesium is the mineral you will burn through the fastest when you're under stress, when you're in fight or flight mode. So magnesium is huge, but there's other minerals and other enzymes. And then the energy for the cell, to make a new cell, you got to have energy. And energy is fuel, just like your car. Fuel, air, spark plug, combustion, you make energy. The fuel for your cell is either from carbohydrates. Carbohydrates turn into glucose, sugar, and that sugar goes through your mitochondria, that's your carburetor in the cell. Or there's another fuel option, fat. You can take a molecule of fat and run it through your carburetor, your mitochondria, to make energy. When you burn a molecule of glucose or sugar for fuel, you'll get 32 molecules of ATP, your energy hormone. So think of it as, energy molecule. Think of it as miles per gallon. One molecule of sugar or glucose from carbs equals 32 miles a gallon, 32 molecules of energy. One molecule of fat burned through that carburetor, your mitochondria, 140 miles a gallon. Get 140 molecules of ATP. Most Americans are on carb, and not just carb, like sweet potatoes and, there's some healthier carbs, lower glycemic carbs. Most Americans are on a highly processed carbohydrate diet. That highly processed carbohydrate, and here's an example. Old-fashioned rolled oats or steel-cut oats. Those aren't very processed. They're minimally processed. It takes a while for the body to break that down and digest it and turn it into blood sugar, as opposed to the 1-minute quick microwave oats. Those are so processed down, they immediately raise your blood sugar. So they're both carbs, but this one's better than this one. The old-fashioned steel cut is better than the fast microwave 1 minute because of the way it's so processed and raises your blood sugar so fast. But if you're on a highly processed, enriched white flour, high fructose corn syrup, sugar, and processed grains is the primary thing you're eating, which is America, you burn through that carburetor so hot and dirty, you make a ton of exhaust. They're called free radicals. When you burn fat for fuel, you make very few free radicals. It's the free radicals, this is the exhaust, that goes and damages the DNA and turns on the prostate cancer growth gene that I mentioned this morning. Those free radicals will go damage the cell membrane. I mentioned insulin resistance this morning. Let me just draw this real quick. Find a blank slide, or I'll just make a blank slide. Okay, so here's your cell. It's actually a bilipid layer. Bilipid layer just means fat. You got two layers with fat. That's a cell membrane. In the cell membrane sits receptors. Think of a receptor as a keyhole. And so these are all different shapes. Just like, I forgot to give you my keys. That's all right, though. A key has a cut to it, fits into a keyhole, right? So these are receptors for different hormones. So we'll say insulin, progesterone, testosterone, vitamin D, which is a hormone, like I said. They click in. When they click into their receptor, then that sends a signal down to your DNA here, and it turns on certain genes and turns off certain genes. What happens, the mitochondria I mentioned, and you have hundreds of these carburetors called mitochondria. Some cells have thousands of these. The high energy cells, like your heart's beating all the time, that has 5,000 mitochondria per cell. Your brain, it has high energy requirements. So this mitochondria, the fuel that I mentioned, either fat or carb, plus oxygen, which is from breathing, obviously. But when you're up and moving, you're going to breathe deeper and better. When you're just sitting and stressed, you don't take deep breaths, you do collarbone breathing when you're under fight or flight. And even when you're not in fight or flight, Americans are chronic upper chest breathers instead of deep breathers. It's a whole nother lecture on breathing. Breathing's amazing if you take a deep, full breath. But fuel, oxygen, spark plug, which is minerals, magnesium and copper mostly, equals ATP, your energy, and equals exhaust, free radicals. The free radicals come and can damage your DNA. Free radicals come and damage this cell membrane, inflame the fat of your cell membrane. And if that fat is more easily oxidizable, and the most oxidizable fats that you could consume, canola oil, soybean oil, corn oil, cottonseed oil, margarine, Crisco. It's all the modern processed vegetable oils. This is what I mentioned this morning. Dr. Chris Kenobi, the ophthalmologist at UT Southwestern. The vegetable oils are highly oxidizable. So if you're consuming raw materials, remember your cells die every day and you make new ones every day. And if the raw material you're putting in is canola oil, then this cell membrane is canola oil, highly oxidizable. And if you're putting the fuel here is a enriched white flour and sugar, you're burning through this carburetor super hot, tons of free radicals coming out, a very oxidizable cell membrane. I mean, that's the perfect recipe. If I wanted to create disease, I would feed people vegetable oils, processed modern man wheat, not God wheat, man wheat, and a processed sweetener like high fructose corn syrup. Processed vegetable oil, processed grain, and processed sugar. If I wanted to make a human being sick, I would encourage you to go to your grocery store and just go up and down the aisle. Spend an afternoon, doesn't this sound fun? Go spend an afternoon at the grocery store, but just flip over packages and start looking, and you will find those three things. That is the standard American diet. The deadliest diet mankind has ever invented is what Americans eat, unless they're purposefully being a modern-day hunter-gatherer. You have to hunt and gather, go look and hunt around the grocery store for some food that is not processed vegetable oil, processed sugar, and processed grain. That's it in a nutshell. That's what you need to go do to be healthy. Don't eat those three American things. But here's where insulin resistance comes in. You inflame the cell membrane, that changes the shape of the keyholes of the receptor. It's just like taking a sledgehammer to the keyhole on the door, and now your key can't fit in it. These type 2 diabetics, if you go measure their insulin level, they actually have a ton of insulin, too much insulin. It's one of the things we check in every single patient that walks in our door, even if they're not diabetic. Every single American should know their insulin level. And if you're above a 5, you're not metabolically flexible and you're going to be a sitting duck for disease and COVID. If you're above a 10, if you're above 15, I don't believe in pre-diabetes. But if you want a clue that you're on the road to diabetes, full blown, I just believe in metabolic flexibility or inflexibility. The very end stage of that is diabetes, but that's the bomb going off I talked about earlier. If you want to know, is my cell healthy? Am I metabolically fit and flexible? Is my mitochondria efficient? Do I have a carburetor that has good miles per gallon, not much smoke coming out of my tailpipe? Insulin level. If you're starting to show signs of insulin resistance, which means your cell membrane's a little inflamed here, that will inflame your keyhole. Insulin, the key, can't fit into the keyhole. I don't want to get too complicated, but follow me here. The pancreas right here in your stomach makes insulin. And just imagine your pancreas has a little monitor that can monitor the level of your blood sugar. If your sugar level's high, the pancreas makes more insulin. The sugar is in your blood. Here's your blood vessel full of sugar from all the carb you're eating, glucose. But that sugar's got to get out of the blood, and as fuel, it's got to get into the cell, into your mitochondria to be used for energy production. But it can't just get out of your blood and just go straight into the cell. There's a pathway. There's a doorway for it to travel through. That door is shut. When insulin fits into the keyhole, the door opens, the sugar goes into the cell, and your blood sugar level's normal. You tracking with me? You got to fit insulin, the key, into the keyhole. That opens the door. The sugar can get in and be burned for fuel. But if your keyhole's been out of shape, the insulin's trying to fit, but it won't, it can't, because the keyhole's been out of shape. So the sugar can't get into the cell. It stays in your blood. You poke your finger and check your blood sugar. Oh, I'm high. Why is my sugar high in the blood? Because it can't get out of the blood. It can't get into the cell, into the mitochondria to be burned as fuel. Why? Because the door's closed. Why? Because the keyhole's bent out of shape. The key is there, insulin is there, but it can't fit. So, but your pancreas is sitting over here seeing your blood sugar's just rising. Oh no, we need more keys. So it's spitting out more and more insulin. It doesn't know. It's not a key problem, it's a keyhole problem, which is really an inflammation problem. So now you've got all this insulin floating around. Well, excess insulin tells you to store fat. So now you're making more fat cells. Guess what fat cells do? Fat cells secrete hormones that cause more keyhole get bent out of shape, more inflammatory hormones. You're in this vicious cycle. I can't get the sugar in the cell because of this inflammation that's jacked up my keyhole. My pancreas just keeps making more insulin, trying to force it in. It doesn't work. Now this excess insulin is making me fat. My fat cells are driving the inflammation. Vicious cycle. All of that can be stopped, broken, reversed. You can go from type 2 diabetic on medication, blood sugar of 400, like the lady this morning I talked about, to 98, normal. And she did. How did she do it? By fasting. Well, you can also do it by getting this fuel, Fat for Fuel. There's a book called Fat for Fuel. Eat fat, but eat the right fat. Traditional fats that your great-grandmother would recognize. Tallow, lard, olive oil, avocado oil, coconut oil, real butter, heavy cream. Real fats, not processed, coming out of a factory, processed vegetable oils. But if you eat fat for fuel, you will decrease your free radicals. You will increase your energy production, 140 miles a gallon. And then you narrow that eating window where there's no food going in for 16 hours, 18 hours, 24 hours. You can even fast for 2 or 3 days. It sounds crazy to some Americans, but you can do it, especially after you're a fat consumer, eating fat for fuel. Your body flips a switch. This is metabolic flexibility. It's like having diesel or gasoline switch on your vehicle. Flip a switch and burn gas for fuel. Flip a switch and burn diesel for fuel. It's like you can just go back and forth. That should be us with carb and fat. We should be able to burn some carb for fuel, but when it's not available, we should just flip right on and burn fat for fuel. Most Americans are stuck. Their switch is stuck in carb burn metabolism, sugar burn metabolism. We don't even know how to burn fat anymore because we don't consume enough of it because we were told to eat low fat. But how does Jason Fung get his patients to not be diabetic anymore? Quit eating carb, eat a lot more good, healthy fat, some also called ketogenic diet, but you don't have to be necessarily all the way to keto. Just decrease the carbs, increase the fat, occasionally don't eat. It's really that simple. It's what that lady did all by herself and dropped her blood sugar, lost weight, felt better, and her doctor told her to stop doing it because he didn't understand all this. We are not taught well at all about insulin resistance. I would say the reason why I wasn't taught any of this drawing, that looks like a real big mess right now, there's not a pill that'll do this. There's no pill that will come in and clean up this keyhole. And what inflames that keyhole is directly related to nutrition, hydration, movement, and peace, diet and lifestyle. That's it. So if you want to reverse chronic disease, not just diabetes, you're going to have to address these root causes. And I'll just say on the peace pillar, because we're going to talk about that a lot this afternoon. When you're in fight or flight mode, you turn this carburetor into, it's like like you're going to pass an 18-wheeler on a 2-lane road. You're putting a gas pedal to the floor, asking for some more. When you're in fight or flight mode, that stresses that mitochondria to produce more energy. In sympathetic dominance mode, your heart rate's up, your breathing rate's up, you're ready to fight or flight. And it gets this carburetor over time of chronic fight or flight mode every single day, day after day after day, or month after year, you burn out your mitochondria. They become very inefficient. And they start blowing a ton of black smoke, these free radicals. So chronic fight or flight mode is not good. And there are some patients where they'll say, Doc, I'm eating perfect. I'm eating high-fat, low-carb, clean. I'm eating ancestral fats. I'm fasting at times. And almost always, if a patient's not dropping their inflammation and getting their symptoms better, it's going to be fight or flight mode, chronic fight or flight. It will mess this whole thing up. Carbs, and I'm not saying never eat carbs. If you're not metabolically flexible, which would be you have hypertension, you're not, for men, 38 inches at the belly button, women 32, 35. But that's one marker, your weight. Is your blood pressure up? Is your insulin up? Is your blood sugar up? This is called metabolic syndrome. Do you have any chronic disease of inflammation, which is all of them? That's all a clue to you're not metabolically flexible. So, more fat, less carb. Once you are metabolically flexible, have some carb here and there. That's fine. Some people need to be real regimented. They have 2 high-carb days, 5 high-fat days, or 4 high-fat days, 2 high-carb, and fast one day. They have this pattern. I think the body likes to mix it up. Everyone's different seasons of your life, different seasons of the year, but you do need to have some days of fasting, some days of higher fat, and some carb is fine. So we know that. We got that down. We got the oxygen down. You got to get up and move. Minerals. This is a key point, and this is where I supplement. And I would say all of my patients have to supplement minerals. You can't supplement your way to health, but if it's not in your food, then your choice is be deficient or supplement. And our mineral, as you're about to see, our mineral levels in our food have been absolutely decimated by farming through man's wisdom instead of God's wisdom. So this is 1900, way down here. And this is iron and calcium and zinc and cobalt and magnesium, copper, selenium, phosphorus, these levels of minerals in the food in the early 1900s. And then this blue line represents mechanized farming. That's, around 1926. So let me tell you about this. Mechanized farming is the plow. When a plow rips through the dirt, one of the things it's doing is disrupting the mycorrhizal fungi, but the fungus in the soil. The fungus in the soil penetrates and grows, and it keeps the soil porous, like a sponge or like a chocolate cake. Think of that consistency with all those little pores in it. That's the fungus. One of the roles of this fungi in the soil is to keep it porous. And the plow disrupts and kills that fungi. It's those pores in the soil that hold and retain water. I just had a guy come out to my place. We have 100 acres. A penetrometer. He was showing me he could push this penetrometer, which is just this little kind of metal rod, into my soil. And with the amount of pressure, not much pressure at all, and he got to like 2 feet deep. But in the plowed field right across this road where it's plowed all year long, he can get like that deep before he has to put enough pressure. There's a lot of compaction. It's got no fungi in it. So the fungi create the pores. The pores hold the water. The water droplets is where the bacteria live. If your soil's not hydrated, you don't have good microbial life going on. So what's the deal with that? Well, it's the microbes, the bacteria, that work on the soil, the stone, the pebbles, all the different components of the dirt, to get the minerals out of the rock into a water-soluble form that the roots of the plant can take up and put into your spinach and your apple and your cherries. It's the bacteria. Remember how important the bacteria was in our gut? Just as important in the soil. But if the fungi are gone, you don't have as much hydration in the soil, you have less bacteria, you don't get as much minerals, and here's what we saw. Mineral content. As soon as mechanized farming came in, the minerals started to go down in our food. So now we've got a plant that's not as strong and healthy, and they're regenerative farmers I've talked to. Their field will be right next to another field. Their field is farmed regeneratively, not sustainably. We can't sustain this degenerative system we're in. Regeneratively, they're regenerating the soil. And the pests don't come. The bugs don't come. They come to the neighbors and they leave theirs alone. The plant's got an immune system. It's mineral dependent. So now we have a demineralized plant, and that demineralized plant isn't as productive. You don't get as much output. You don't get as many kernels of corn or bushels of wheat or whatever. So the war ends. All the chemical weaponry, chemical warfare, a lot of that was shifted to the ag industry, and ammonium nitrate, artificial synthetic fertilizer comes in. And what happened was the Green Revolution. This fertilizer comes onto the field, and it causes tremendous growth and a lot of green and a lot of tonnage. So you get more tons of corn and bushels of wheat, more hay. You get the growth, but it's rapid and fast, and it doesn't give enough time for the trace minerals to come in. But more importantly, it disrupts this perfect balance of all the different minerals. When you pour on just one, in a synthetic form especially, it disrupts the balance of minerals because the plants actually secrete through their roots plant exudate that attracts and actually calls forth the bacteria to migrate in and give that plant the mineral it needs. So if you start artificially applying 1 or 2 or 3, the big 3 in NPK, it disrupts that whole amazing, awesome balance. So you get a lot of growth, you get a lot of tonnage, the production goes up per acre, but the actual plant itself is less healthy, and the soil is less healthy. And the mineralization of that soil, because the bacteria get disrupted, is less, as you see here. So now we got an even weaker plant because of demineralization. So now the pests move in. So we come in with pesticide, herbicide, fungicide, and we battle off those pests. But when you spray that, it also kills the bugs in the soil. And it's the bacteria in the soil, remember, that release the minerals into the plant. So now we've got less minerals. And these red lines are disease rates. This is correlation, doesn't mean causation. There's a correlation. We can't really say it's for sure cause, but heart conditions and asthma and obesity and cancer. And then the nail in the coffin in the 1990s, glyphosate, which is the main ingredient in Roundup. So glyphosate was originally patented as an antibiotic. and it decimates the bugs in the soil. It disrupts the shikimate pathway. And the reason Monsanto was able to get it approved for human consumption was because a human body doesn't have the shikimate pathway in it, but the bacteria do. So the bacteria in the soil get killed, and the bacteria in your gut get killed. Secondly, it's patented as a chelator. Glyphosate chelates, which that's a Greek term, to claw and grab, hold on to, don't let go of. It chelates minerals, copper in particular. I didn't tell you in that drawing, the spark plug for energy production mostly is copper and magnesium. And I didn't draw it all on there, but the free radicals, the exhaust that was coming out and damaging your cell membrane and your DNA, God gave us antioxidant enzymes that gobble up the free radicals, clean up that black smoke for you. Gone. These antioxidant enzymes run off minerals, remember, enzymes and minerals, mostly magnesium and copper. So the minerals you need to make the energy, spark plug, combustion, make energy, and the minerals you need to clean up your black smoke, exhaust free radicals, magnesium and copper, mostly. Glyphosate chelates it. So now we get down to the very end, and there's really not much left in our food. And that's what the studies show, multiple studies. I'm not going to go through them all because I'm going to speed it up. This study, though, there's one other part I want to mention. This is Don Davis, UT Austin, looked at 43 or so different garden crops and compared the vitamin and mineral levels from 1950s to 1997. Dramatic drops across the board in vitamin and mineral content. You have to eat like 25 apples today to equal what was in one apple. Wow. 25 apples in 1997 to equal what was in one apple in 1950. So now it's probably 50 apples. But this one comment I found in this article, the nutrient value has declined in recent decades while farmers have been planting crops designed to improve other traits. The farmer is picking certain varieties of corn or tomatoes or whatever to improve certain other traits, not the nutrient levels. Farmers don't get paid on how much magnesium is in this tomato. They don't get paid per that. They have to have a very uniform, pretty, shiny, round, unblemished, can sit on the shelf for a long time, so you'll buy it. Who's going to buy a puny little deformed apple that's a little blemished instead of a nice, big, juicy, sugary, perfect, pretty apple? So it's not necessarily farmers' fault, it's the consumers. We should demand nutrient-dense food, and you can demand it with your dollars by finding a regenerative farmer and buying from him. This just shows a bunch of the mineral levels, copper in particular. Copper decreased more than any other mineral, 81% decrease in copper. So, I mean, some guys, gals will look at me because totally conventional minded, they're brand new to this, and they're like, vitamins, minerals, you really need them? I mean, is it that important? I'll show them this. This is a complex network of biochemical reactions in the body. If you zoomed in on just like one part of this amazing complex cellular chemical reaction, you get this, a citric acid cycle. Remember, that's just one part of this amazing complex thing. And this is just the B vitamins I've highlighted, B3, B5, B1, B2, B7, just the B vitamins. That's not magnesium, it's not copper, it's not all the other vitamins. That cycle won't work right if you don't have these nutrients. It's that simple. I mean, it's super complex, but super simple, and this will drive it home even more. This study, Parkinson's disease death rate. So Dr. Marty Hens, neurologist up in Minnesota, he was studying, this is the Parkinson's death rate, 1980, but if you follow this out, 1970, 1950, 1940, it was pretty flatlined. How many Parkinson's disease patients die per year? It was pretty much the same, decade after decade after decade. And then in 1976, something happened, and the death rates in Parkinson's started to go up. And they're dying from all sorts of things, colon cancer, heart attacks, strokes, different things, but just a lot more death in Parkinson's patients to the tune of 328% increase in death in Parkinson's patients. And he was scratching his head, and others were too. What's going on here? What happened in 1976? what he found, when you have Parkinson's, you don't have enough dopamine, neurochemical in your brain. And so the treatment for it was give patients dopamine. It was called L-Dopa. So that was the treatment all these years, L-Dopa, L-Dopa, L-Dopa. It helped a little bit, helped with the tremors and stuff, didn't cure it. But L-Dopa causes lots of nausea and vomiting, it's hard to take, it's tough. And so patients were not very compliant. They would skip, they'd quit taking it. So someone, looked at that and thought, well, maybe there's something we can do to help that nausea. So they added carby, a chemical compound, to the dopa to make carbidopa. Carbidopa, prescription drug for Parkinson's. What Dr. Hinz discovered was the carby part of that drug permanently grabs, holds on to, and doesn't let go vitamin B6. As he states here, irreversibly binds to and permanently deactivates pyroxadyl 5-phosphate, PLP, which is vitamin B6. Yeah, the active form of vitamin B6. I don't know if I have it on the next. No, I don't. He goes on the next page to show 300 different enzymes in the body. Remember, enzymes are the workers. Got a sunshine, cholesterol in your skin. An enzyme cleaves that cholesterol to make vitamin D. 300 different enzymes in the body need vitamin B6 to do their job. And we just permanently and irreversibly bound up vitamin B6. And his theory and proposal is that's why we see this dramatic rise in death of Parkinson's, because we bound up one nutrient, vitamin B6. So imagine all the nutrients put together. If it's not in our food, or even if it is in your food, but you're not eating that food, you're eating standard American processed food-like substances, 60-something% of what standard regular Americans are eating isn't food. It's processed food-like substances, and it's devoid of these nutrients. We already talked about mitochondria carburetor, make energy, clear exhaust. Your number one killer, heart disease. This book explains how it's not the clogged artery theory we already talked about. Ansel Keys. I don't know if I finished that. The 7-country study. He left out 15 other countries. I didn't finish that because I don't remember saying this. That got us on this whole low-fat thing. He produced 7 countries that showed whoever eats the most fat has the most heart attacks. Well, it turned out there were 15 other countries in the study he didn't publish. He took them out. It was a 22-country study. He cherry-picked 7 that fit his preconceived notion. The other 15 were exact opposite. France. Number one consumer of saturated fat in their diet. They eat a ton of butter. The least amount of heart attacks than any country in the study. Well, that didn't fit his ideas, so he took France out. Sorry, I forgot to finish that story. I'll go on these tangents. But that clogged artery theory is wrong. It's well proven. American Cardiology, College of Cardiology study I showed you from August said eat your red meat, your dark chocolate, your full-fat, heavy whipping cream. Eat it non-processed. But that's not the cause of heart attacks. That's a great book. And this book, in a nutshell, is going to tell you it's a mitochondrial issue. If your heart muscle's mitochondria is inefficient, as I drew out earlier, it can result in heart attacks. Dr. Nasha Winters just got a scan back on a patient 2 weeks ago. Pancreatic cancer, repeat scan, totally clear. Pancreatic cancer is pretty much a death sentence. That's the second pancreatic clear scan, second patient I've seen with Dr. Nasha Winters' protocol. It's all about cancer as a metabolic disease, not a gene disease. Remember, gene theory is not, it's a half-truth. Something's turning on the bad genes, and in her theory, what's turning on the bad genes is all that black smoke coming out of your mitochondria carburetor because of the standard American diet, the processed oils, processed grain, the processed sugar. All that black smoke, free radicals, is turning on the bad genes. That's what her book's about. Mitochondria and the Future of Medicine, the Alzheimer's Antidote. It's all about the mitochondria. If you read that book, I'm just saving you all a lot of book reading. You don't need to go read any of those. Just remember, feed your mitochondria. Real food, ancestral fats. Occasionally don't eat. This autism epidemic, In this book, J.B. Hanley, whose son is vaccine injured and autistic, and is much, much, much better now. J.B. Hanley shows in that book, and has a quote, and I would read it to you if I had it, I'll paraphrase. The doctor at Johns Hopkins, Dr. Kelly. Dr. Kelly gets called to the witness stand at the National Vaccine Injury Compensation Court that I don't recall learning about in med school. Dr. Gillum, don't know if you do. I don't remember in residency or med school learning about there's a court. It's not a real court. It's a government bureaucracy committee, basically. If your child or adult, the flu vaccine injures more than any other vaccine, but most of these are kids that go to the court. A Stanford study showed that vaccine-injured people, only 1% of them get reported to this court, mostly because the doctors and the parents don't know you can, or they don't associate the injury to the vaccine. So only 1% are reported. Of those 1%, only 1/3 get compensated. I mean, it is a battle if you have a vaccine-injured kid. And Dr. Kelly, historically, has been the one that the government calls, puts on the witness stand, and he'll say, no, this injury is not from this vaccine, case dismissed. No, case dismissed. No, case dismissed. Super sad when you see these kids. Well, Dr. Kelly's own junior doctor, Dr. Pauling, had a baby, Hannah Pauling. Hannah, I think it was her 18-month shots, don't quote me on that, was injured by her vaccine, 18-month vaccine, and regressed from playing patty cake, saying hi, Mom, or whatever, her different milestones she was meeting, totally regressed. No eye contact, quit playing patty cake, quit doing all the different things. I mean, right before their eyes. And the interesting thing is they were doing a study at that time, and she was enrolled in it to prove that vaccines couldn't cause autism. And in this case, because they saw that it happened right in front of their eyes to his own daughter. So Dr. Kelly admitted in that case, yes, Hannah Pauling's autism was caused by the toxins in the vaccine because she was predisposed to injury because she had inefficient mitochondria. If the mitochondria doesn't work well, you're going to be susceptible to disease. Alzheimer's disease, cancer, heart disease, autism, COVID-19. Your white blood cell, your immune system cell, needs energy to gobble up COVID. A macrophage, the Pac-Man of your immune system, how does it kill? How does remdesivir work? It triggers nitric oxide to be produced in the macrophage and it kills the virus. What's the God-given mechanism to produce nitric oxide in the macrophage to kill that virus? Copper. It's copper-dependent enzymes. If we don't have these minerals and we don't have a healthy cell membrane and we don't have the right fuel and we don't have oxygen and we don't have a mitochondria making energy for that white blood cell to do what it needs to do, it won't. It can't. And you'll be more susceptible. It's all about making energy and clearing exhaust. We're going to fly through some of this. That's William Osler, which they asked Osler, turn of the century, founder of Johns Hopkins Medical School, and they asked him, Dr. Kenobi pointed this out, how many heart attacks did you see in your career from 1890 to 1910 or something? 0. 0 cases of a heart attack at Johns Hopkins, founder of the medical school, founder of the modern medicine. He saw 20 cases of angina and no heart attacks. It's crazy. But he's famous for saying one of the first duties of the physician is to educate the masses not to take medicine. Edison, the doctor of the future, will give no medicine but will instruct his patients in the care of the human frame, in diet, and in the cause and prevention of disease. real quick, I'm saving time, so I'm not going to go deeply into this. We know what conventional medicine is. It treats a symptom. Reflux, hypertension, headaches, whatever. Integrative means you integrate other modalities from around the world, typically. I've been on phone calls with amazingly smart, compassionate, awesome doctors in Italy in the ICU treating COVID this spring with ozone. Ozone is oxygen. It's O3 instead of O2. When lightning strikes in the atmosphere, it makes ozone. That's that smell, part of that smell when it rains after a thunderstorm. Ozone has been used medicinally in the human body for 100 years in Germany and other countries, and there's a stack of published literature this tall. And these guys are using it in the ICU and having great results. On the ventilator, high mortality rates, comorbid conditions, old people, elderly folks should die. And the ones that got ozone did it way better than the ones who didn't. So that's an example. Integrate in some different therapies. Dr. Nasha Winters, the metabolic approach to cancer. I had a patient walk into my clinic, this was like 3 years ago. He didn't have an appointment. It was the end of the day. He's a pretty highly respected, well-known, very successful in the real estate businessman in West Texas. And he walks in and says, "Hey, doc, can you inject this into me?" And he hands me a box, and it was like in German. And I'm like, "No, I can't inject this into you. What is this?" And he said, "Mistletoe." And there happened to be some mistletoe in the tree outside of my clinic. I'm like, "Mistletoe like that right there?" He's like, "Well, it's a very specific kind. They're different, trees have different species of mistletoe, like apple tree and oak trees, and different trees have different species." I'm like, "Okay. So like you crushed up some mistletoe and you inject it?" He says, "Well, you purify it, blah, blah, blah." And I'm like, "Where did you even get this?" He said, "Doc, 6 months ago, I was diagnosed with prostate cancer. My PSA was 300. It should be less than 4. And my PET scan showed I had lesions, metastatic prostate lesions all throughout my skeleton." And because he's pretty well off, he went to Texas Tech Medical, got their opinion, which the opinion was you got end-stage prostate cancer, get on hospice pretty much. I mean, you could do some hormone injections and maybe help with the pain. Well, he didn't like that answer, so he went to MD Anderson, got about the same answer. Then he went to Harvard, got about the same answer. Went to Mayo, got about the same answer. So then he went to Germany, spent a number of weeks there, did a number of therapies, but mistletoe was the backbone of the therapy. And he did a repeat PET scan, and he was clear, and his PSA was normal. And his doctor in Germany said, "Be sure to continue your mistletoe injections." Again, this was part of a robust integrative therapy. So they integrate all these different things, but this was a big pillar. That's where I first learned about mistletoe. So what I'm saying is you can integrate all these really cool different things from around the world. There's tons of them. I don't know even half of them. But a lot of that is still the bomb's gone off and you're trying to clean up a mess, or you're just treating like diabetes. Berberine, it's an herb. It lowers blood sugar. And it lowers blood sugar just as well as metformin does in a head-to-head clinical trial. So metformin's a pharmaceutical, berberine's an herb. But they work the same. They work well to lower blood sugar for a time. But if you don't address insulin resistance, remember over time, you're going to need more and more of whichever one you're using. But my point is there's a green version of treat a symptom, and there's a pharmaceutical version of treat a symptom. You're still just treating a symptom. So be careful, and I caution you. And I'm not saying don't use herbs and all that's fine, but just really think, am I treating a symptom or am I dealing with the root? Because you shouldn't be diabetic. Just fix the diabetes and don't be diabetic. There's some great herbs for prostate infections and bladder infections, and that's okay. But you shouldn't have to do that recurrently and over and over and over. So just careful with integrative. Acupuncture, there's lots of things. Before we move to hydration and spiritual and COVID, I do have to say, because it's very unfortunate, especially in the last few weeks and months, it's become exquisitely clear. And Dr. Peter McCullough, Vice Chair of Internal Medicine at Baylor, Dallas, was in a Senate committee hearing 2 days ago, and he put it on the congressional record that academic medicine, there's fraud going on in academia, in medicine. And he just called it out. And we'll talk about him and exactly what he was talking about later. But this is the former editor of the New England Journal of Medicine. It is simply no longer possible to believe much of the clinical research that is published or to rely on the judgment of trusted physicians or authoritative medical guidelines. I take no pleasure in this conclusion, which I reached slowly and reluctantly over my 2 decades as editor of the New England Journal of Medicine. Here's the Lancet, the Great Britain or English version, basically, one of the best journals in the world. Former editor-in-chief Richard Horton. Much of the scientific literature, perhaps half, may simply be untrue, afflicted by studies with small sample sizes, tiny effects, invalid exploratory analysis, and flagrant conflicts of interest, together with an obsession for pursuing fashionable trends of dubious importance. Science has taken a turn towards darkness. When you put science up as God, and the spirit of intellectualism, which is demonic, and you put that as your idol and your safety and your security and your hope and everything's in that, be ready for disappointment. Because in our finite human mind, there's no way we can figure out this amazing complex physiology. We have a window into it, and using the Holy Spirit and your spirit to have some revelation, knowledge, and understanding about your particular situation. I'm not saying don't ever use science or don't ever use conventional medicine. What I'm trying to say is, be careful. These are men and women who are human, fallible, bias, the need and the addiction of power, fame, money, prestige, and position and all that. Just like it is with all of us, we're tempted in money and in power and in prestige. These people are too. And although there's things in place, peer review, what if all the peers are biased and corrupt, which is certainly seems to be the case with hydroxychloroquine in particular, which is what Dr. McCullough was talking about. Be very careful to put all your hope, faith, and trust in that system, in science in general. Be discerning. I quote science all the time. I've quoted a lot today. But be discerning. Don't put all your hope and trust and faith in it. Okay. We're going to move on to something I love to talk about. And guys, y'all wouldn't believe this, but when I was little, I hated public speaking, like speech class in school growing up. My dad made me take it, hated it, turned beet red, hydration. And now, if I'm talking about this stuff, I love it. And like I just soak it in and I'll read something and it sticks. And in med school, I had to work pretty hard. I just studied way harder than Dr. Gillum. I was in the library all night trying to memorize all this stuff. I didn't have a photographic memory. But when you're doing what God's called you to do, it should come easy or easy. It should be tending, not toiling. I can have a full, busy, long, full day. But if I'm doing what God's made me to do, it'll be fine. I'm not stressed. I'm not anything. I had a full, good, hard, busy day, but it was all good. But if I'm not, if I'm off from the bullseye of who He made me to be, then it'll be toiling. And that's not what we need to be doing. Movement. I'm sorry, I'm just not seeing my hydration. I may just get to talking to you. Wait for that to pull up. Movement. We kind of touched on it, and just real quick. The counterfeit to the truth on movement is I can sit all day long in my seat and then go work out in the gym for 45 minutes at the end of the day and be fine. It's fine to work out at the end of the day, and there's benefit to that, but it doesn't mitigate, it doesn't erase all the negative impacts of sitting in a seated position for 8 hours. So if you're at a desk job, stand up every hour. Do a couple of squats, walk to the cooler, walk up and down the stairs, whatever. Set your alarm every hour, get up and move. Even just getting up a little bit, get a standing desk, get an uncomfortable chair that makes you stand up. Do something to make yourself move. The second part of movement is outside. Get outside. We touched on it earlier. When your eyeballs see green stuff, when your senses are in nature, hear birds, the wind, smell the earth, all of that, just being outside. So get your workout outside if you can. The sunshine is so beneficial. Third thing with movement is occasionally get your heart rate up. Occasionally, a little bit. And what I mean by that, you can do high intensity interval training, HIIT, H-I-I-T. And just look that up. There's lots of different examples, but in a nutshell, 30 seconds, go as hard as you can with whatever you're doing, jumping jacks, swimming, bicycling, walking, whatever. But go hard as you can for 30 seconds. After 30 seconds, go back into cruise control mode. And you can do this with weights, anything. Just go hard as you can, 30 seconds. And then 90 seconds, cruise control, 30 seconds, hard as you can till you can't breathe hardly. And then 90 seconds, and just do that. 30, 90, 30, 90 for a few minutes, like 7 minutes. One study I read, 7 minutes of that is equal to 45 minutes of aerobics. You're getting after it, but you're at a straight pace the whole time in your aerobics class. They even do those anymore. Do HIIT, okay? That's movement. Hydration is not popping up, so I'm just going to talk about hydration because there's not a whole lot to show you anyways. This sounds so simple, just hydrate. And it is pretty simple, but there's some deception there. Obviously, we don't want to drink sugar water. Sugar water's not good, and that's where most people get their sugar in, is in drinks. If it's in a grocery store or a convenience store, it's probably got sugar in it. If it doesn't have sugar, if it says diet or no sugar, zero sugar, don't get that because that's artificial sugar in there. Aspartame, NutraSweet, Splenda, all that. Sucralose, don't do that. It's not good, just trust me. I'm not going to waste time on that now. That's man food, not God food. But if it's in a store, it's going to be sweet. Juice, sweet. Sugar, tons of sugar. Powerade, Gatorade, sugar, sugar, sugar. It's all sugar because Americans don't eat stuff that's not sweet because sugar hits your dopamine center, that pleasure hormone. Give me more. Sugar lights that up more than cocaine does, more addictive than cocaine. And they know that, so they put it in everything, so you'll go buy more of it, and it's a vicious cycle. So get off the drinks from the store pretty much. Water. Sparkling water is fine. Make your own fizzy drinks at home. You could use stevia drops if you need some sweet. Stevia is an herb, and it's fine. Do that. 8 glasses a day, or your body weight divided by 2 in ounces and all that, it's okay. But everyone's unique and different. I need to hydrate more. I'm under these bright lights. I'm talking, so more expiration of water's coming out of my breath. I'm sweating a little bit because I'm just warm. I'm totally different than y'all. So I'm going to need different water right now. So watch your urine. If your urine's yellow, dark yellow especially, your body's holding onto water, and that makes your urine more concentrated. Why is your body holding on to all this water? Because it needs it. It's trying to conserve water, so give it more. So if your urine's too yellow, drink more water. If your urine looks like water, you're hydrated. You're fine. Back off. Or simple. But what type of water? God's original intent is what I always think of. Well, what water was in the garden? Can we get that? Do we even know what that was? But water in nature, how is water found in nature? What were our ancestors doing 100 years ago, 200, 300 years ago? They were eating their water. Half the water consumption per anthropologist study of this, Dr. Gina Bria, she's not a doctor, she's got a master's in anthropology. Gina Bria, her book is called Quench, thehydrationfoundation.org, I think. Great information there, but what she found was ancestrally we ate our water. Vegetables are full of water, fruits full of water. Meat that's not dehydrated. Think of a steak versus a piece of beef jerky. How do they turn a steak into jerky? They dehydrate it. There's tons of water in steak. Broths, soups, where they ate their water. Chia seeds. You put chia seed into some milk, almond milk, or even just water, and leave it all night long. It'll soak that up and turn into chia seed pudding. She found a tribe in South America. They would run 50 miles. And how did they hydrate? Chia seeds. The chia seed holds onto that water and will slowly release it out of your gut. If you're going to eat a dehydrating food, which is like a piece of pizza, even if it's a healthier, like cauliflower crust,
It's still dehydrating. Eat a salad or an apple, something hydrating with it. So little tricks like that, try to eat half your water. But then when you're drinking water, if you can find spring water that's clean, that's awesome. Glacier water, any water from a natural pristine source. That's hard to find. So the next step would be, let's filter it. It's dirty water, it's tap water, it's whatever, polluted water, so let's filter it. So filtered is fine, but like the best filters take out the good stuff, the minerals, along with the bad stuff. Like RO water, that's probably one of the best filters, but it takes out everything, the minerals. So clean is good, better, and best. Good is clean and filtered. Better is clean and remineralized. And best is structured. So that's probably a new term. It was to me, but it's been around for like 20, 30 years. Dr. Gerald Pollack, University of Washington, he wrote a book called The Fourth Phase of Water. Most people call it structured water now. Water found in nature. Water in a vegetable, it's structured. Rainwater is partly structured. Water moving down a brook or a creek or river is partly structured. Water bubbling up out of a spring is structured. It's this fourth phase of water. We know about liquid, solid, and vapor. This fourth phase is more like a jello. And Dr. Pollack was doing an experiment on a heart muscle cell, and he accidentally punctured a hole in the cell membrane, and he thought the water would just squirt out, kind of like a water balloon. If you poked a hole, the water would squirt out, and it didn't. The cell maintained its integrity, so he poked another hole and another hole and another hole, and he discovered, that something's different about this water inside our cells. And he went on to study and found out it's H3O2. Not H2O, H3O2. Structured water. So it's just a molecular change. And there are devices you can get that will structure the water. We have under the sink device, it's a filter, then a remineralizer, and then a structured, and it just vortexes it. And it's not jello coming out of our faucet, obviously, but there's some H3O2 in it. Put a pinch of sea salt in your water, that will start the chemical structuring process of that water. Not to full jello, but it starts to give a charge. Structured water is charged. It has an energetic charge to it. It's very beneficial for our health. And again, water found in nature, water in motion, rainwater, vegetables. So I would recommend you look into that, thehydrationfoundation.org, thewellnessenterprise.com, I think, has lots of different devices. It's like a warehouse of lots of different devices. But here's where we intersect spiritual, with the peace pillar, and spiritual and the physical. So I started to study this water. Water's all through Scripture, obviously. It's amazing. And how when God created everything in the waters, and He separated, and the firmament, and I don't understand all that, but we are 90+% water, our human body. If you lined up all the molecules that make up you, every 10th molecule would be something other than water. We are water. So keep that in mind. You're a walking bag of water. Now, this might sound a little crazy, but I'm going to tell you anyways. If you think I'm crazy, that's fine. Hopefully got some out of the rest of it. There was a doctor, Jacques Vimbanist, in France in the 90s, I think. Might have been the 80s. He was an immunologist. He studied the immune system, allergies and allergy shots and all that in particular. So he developed this test. So like if you think you're allergic to dogs, you might go to Dr. Gillum. He'll draw your blood. He could send it off for a test called the RAS test, where they basically take your blood, mix it with dog dander, and see if histamine gets released out of your mast cells, these cells in your blood that hold histamine. If dog dander causes you to just release all your histamine, you're allergic to dog dander. So that was Dr. Vimbanist. That's what he did in his lab. Well, one of his comrades said, "Hey, doc, can I dilute the dog dander a bunch?" And this is homeopathy. Homeopathy is a branch of integrative medicine, a very specific branch of medicine, and it's kind of getting outlawed. Historically, though, the American Homeopathic Medical Association, founded in 1846 in America. The AMA, American Medical Association, was founded a few years after. So the homeopaths were here first. There were 23 homeopathic medical schools in America. And then Rockefeller and Carnegie put out a report called the Flexner Report in the 1920s, and they wanted to standardize medical education to the allopathic model, and they shut down all those others. But what homeopathy is, like cures like. That mistletoe, I know this is going to sound crazy, but in the 1800s, a guy looked at that mistletoe and said, that's a parasitic growth on this tree. Somehow, maybe God told him, I don't know. He decided to grind that up, extract some chemical out of it, and shoot it into a cancer patient and cause the tumor to go away. Like cures like. I know it sounds crazy. I don't understand homeopathy. Totally, I'm not a homeopath. But back to the dog dander. So Benveniste said, yeah, you can do a homeopathic dilution. So what the homeopaths do, they'll take the dog dander, put it into a vial of water, shake it up. Take 1 drop of that out, put it into another vial of pure water, shake it up. Take 1 drop of that out, put it into another vial of pure water, shake it. Take a drop, and you keep doing that 10 times. And then by the 10th time, it's like 1 to the trillionth. There's no more physical dog dander in that water. He took a drop of that water, mixed it with the patient's blood, and histamine release. He concluded water holds information, holds memory. And this is homeopathy. They get different things in nature and dilute them down, and they're called homeopathic remedies, and homeopaths know which remedy to use for which illness. Again, I'm not a homeopath, don't understand it, but this is the concept. So Dr. Benveniste was blown away. He thought, this is crazy. This is going to turn science on its head. There's no way this could be true. He said, let's do it again. They did it again. It did it again. And they replicated it over and over and over. So he went to the journal Nature, one of the top journals in the world, maybe the top, and presented his data, and Nature said, there's no way. We can't publish this. This is crazy. For 2 years, they battled back and forth, and Nature came to his lab, observed him do the entire experiment, and it did it. So they published. Nature published it. The whole scientific community said, this is crazy. It's a fraud. Somehow Benveniste tricked you. He's a fraud. And he spent the next 10 years defending his name, and he died probably from chronic fight or flight mode. So Dr. Luc Montagnier, Nobel Prize winner, 2008, for discovering HIV. He wins a Nobel Prize. Luc Montagnier, Nobel Prize winner, super respected throughout the world, scientific world, and he said, I'm going to see if Benveniste was a quack and a liar and a fraud or true. So he did the exact same experiment, but with HIV. He took HIV DNA, diluted it down 10 times to where there's no more DNA in the sample. It's just water. He took the water, and he was able to reconstitute HIV virus from that water. Incredible. So water holds memory. I don't understand it totally. Y'all probably don't understand. If that was the first time you heard it, you might not even believe it. I mean, this is crazy stuff sounding. But if you can understand, your water, you're a bag of water. Water holds memory. Then let's go to Japan. Dr. Emoto in Japan. He got the inclination to take pictures of water droplets under the microscope. He would freeze a water droplet, take a picture, and they're beautiful, looks like a snowflake, just beautiful, geometric, symmetrical, perfect, beautiful. Well, then he got water samples from polluted sources, like a polluted river or sewer or whatever, and he froze it and he looked, and they were just real disfigured looking shapes of water molecules. But then, this is where we take a big leap. He got pure water and he spoke to the water. I hate you, I want to kill you, or whatever, just ugly hatefulness. And he froze it and he took a picture of it. And these are all in his books, these photographs. And they're like, it's a misshapen, ugly. And then he took pictures of water where he said, I love you, and just basically the fruits of the Spirit, to it, and it was beautiful structures. I mean, this was purely physically beautiful versus ugly, okay? So I read that book, and I'm like, that's interesting. And I don't know Emoto's beliefs. I didn't dig into, his whole career or anything, but he produced those experiments. And so I just put that in the back of my mind. Then I read some books, or a book about these transplant patients, like heart transplant patients. Maybe y'all have heard of these sounds crazy stories. A person will receive an organ from another person, and they will wake up and through the recovery process start to have recollections of memories that aren't their own. And it turns out when they investigate the donor, it matches the donor's life. Like some guy thought he knew how to play the violin or something like that. He didn't know how to play a violin, but so doctors started listening to these anecdotal reports. And doctors or scientists haven't really been able to figure out where our memories are stored, because in the brain, they've cut out like every part of your brain, and people still maintain long-term memories. So the leading theory and the kind of these progressive out there doctors are saying your memories are stored in the water around the organs and the different organs of your body. The traditional Chinese medicine has always said, looking back thousands of years when you read their books, that different emotions are associated with different organs, like anger emotion affects your liver, or I don't have those memorized either. I don't know exactly. So now it's just like, whoa. Now I was praying about it and asking God, what is this? And how does all this fit? And this is crazy, amazing. So then I read Dr. Bruce Lipton's book, Biology of Belief. Bruce Lipton was not a believer, now he is, and he's a medical school professor. He was is a cellular physiologist. In the 1960s, Watson and Crick in the 1950s, Watson and Crick, double helix DNA. Just a few years later, in the 1960s, Bruce Lipton, did an experiment, because everyone was off on the gene theory at that point. We just found out the double helix, the shape of the DNA and all that. Lipton took embryonic stem cells. So a sperm and egg come together, make a daughter cell, and it divides and makes 2 daughter cells, and those divide to make 4 and 8 and 16, and it just keeps going. So these early embryonic cells are the exact same cells, same DNA. They're identical cells. So he took these identical cells, but he put them into different petri dishes, 3 different petri dishes. And in one petri dish, he changed the temperature. In this petri dish, he changed, I think it was the oxygen content. And in this petri dish, he changed like the pH. And he let them just grow and grow and grow and grow and grow. And he watched them over time. And the first one ended up growing into bone, and the next one into skin, and the next one into muscle. And in that moment, he realized these are all the same genes. These are the identical cells. And the only difference is I changed an external influence, an environmental influence that impacted the cell to grow into different things. That was the first epigenetic experiment. Something outside your genes impacted the genetic expression. That was in the 60s. He continued his work all these decades, and in the 90s, he was doing some experiments with people, and he was measuring that autopilot nervous system I was telling you all about this morning, sympathetic, parasympathetic. He would take people, put them into a stressful environment. Everybody was in the same stressful environment, and he measured their response. You can measure parasympathetic and sympathetic. They all flipped into fight or flight in this stressful circumstance. But then a group of them, some of them would, in a few minutes, flip back into parasympathetic. And some stayed in sympathetic the whole rest of the experiment. His conclusion from that was, it's not our external circumstances that cause our stress. It's our interpretation of them, our goggles. What goggles are we wearing, looking at life through? How are we interpreting this ugly, my boss yelled at me, my spouse and I got in a fight, the IRS just sent me a letter and I'm going bankrupt or whatever. These circumstances, turn on the news and watch anything. These circumstances come in that are bad, in quotes. All things work for the good of those who love him, so there's no bad, actually. It's our interpretation, our beliefs. So Dr. Lipton called it false beliefs. People have false beliefs, and when they have these false beliefs, things happen to them, and they interpret it, and they stay in fight or flight mode because of it. So I read that, and then I read Caroline Leaf, Switch on Your Brain, and Caroline Leaf takes God's word and matches it up with all the science. And she shows an experiment from Harvard where someone speaks anger and hatred, the double helix DNA tightens up. And when you speak love and appreciation and gratitude, the DNA goes back to normal shape. Well, that DNA is floating in structured water in your cell. Your whole cell's water. And that mitochondria is sitting in water. Your DNA is sitting in that water. All of it's water. So if you think about Emoto's work, when you speak to water and it changes shape, and Caroline Leaf saying, hey, the DNA just tightened up when you said ugly things. And you start to see the water that holds all these physical structures is being impacted by the spoken word and your thoughts. And then you start to line up Scripture, as a man thinketh, so is he. Get Caroline Leaf's book. It's amazing, matching all that up. And then there's a book called Memory Code, and he talks about these memories from, events happen in our life. Here's how I see it. Events happen in our life, even in the womb, even before conception. Because if you think about this, the egg that became you, sperm and egg together became you, the egg that came from your mom was made when your mom was in the womb of your grandmother. Because women have all the eggs that they'll ever have and put out every month made in utero, in the womb. You have all the eggs you're ever going to have when you're born. Where men, the sperm are made all the time, all their life. So think about that for a minute. Your grandma is in some situation, has a thought, if it wasn't lined up with the truth, and that's going to impact the water and the DNA and the cells and all that of the growing fetus in her womb, and the egg that fetus is making that's going to become you 2 generations later. Wild. When you look at the science on that, it's amazing. So, events happen in our life. The event's real. It evokes an emotion. We're emotional beings. Emotions aren't bad. We're supposed to have emotions. Event is real. Emotion is real. But then, here's the vital point. Are you going to take captive that thought and filter that thought through the truth or through a lie? And if you filter it through a lie, not only can that drive fight or flight in you and all those negative effects of fight or flight, but it can change the structure of the water. It will change the structure of the water, and therefore genetic expression, mitochondrial function, and the whole deal. Just from a thought that's rooted in a lie. It's amazing. So this is why stress management, go outside and take a walk and sing Kumbaya and do whatever else, bring your heart rate down for a minute, that's okay. Go relax, do something relaxing. But then you come back to the real world, come back into your office or into your home, and the kids are yelling, and this is happening, and life is going on, and blah, blah, blah. It's not about stress management. We need to be able to walk through the day, no matter what comes at us, interpret it through the goggles of the truth all day, every time. And of course, no one's going to do that perfectly. Jesus did, coming out of the 40 days in the desert, and Satan comes to him, turn this rock into bread. Provision. He tempted him with provision. And what did Jesus do? The truth. He spoke the truth back to Satan. Next temptation, protection. You take him to the top of the temple, jump down from here. The angels will come save you and you won't get hurt. He tempted him in protection. And Jesus answered with the truth. Third, identity. He took them up to the mountaintop. Look at all this. I'll give you all this if you'll bow down and kneel to me. And Jesus answered that with the truth. Provision, protection, and identity. When I really drill down with patients on the peace pillar and their thoughts and what are they thinking, why are they thinking, it's usually one of those three things. Provision, protection, identity. So as I started drilling down more, just personally and for my patients and all that, and God was just bringing different people into my life. Bring up my whiteboard real quick, if it'll still work. Oops. So just to give you some background, I was born and raised Belton, Texas, as I told you, First Baptist Church, Belton, Texas. And it was great. I learned the gospel of salvation, which is great. Jesus is God's Son, died on the cross, got saved, going to heaven. Now let's go knock on 20 doors and get 20 other people saved. And what I missed growing up was the gospel of the kingdom. I had the gospel of salvation nailed down pat. Raised my hand, sinner's prayer, got baptized, going to heaven, done. That left me spiritually immature, knocked around by every little thing. Satan had a heyday. I was drinking milk till my mid-30s. Paul came to teach these people some meat, and he saw, y'all are still drinking milk. I can't even teach you these elementary doctrines. When I went and read the elementary doctrines, when a guy told me, go read those elementary doctrines, like, man, I don't even know what these are. I don't understand them. These are the elementary doctrines. I should have known those when I was a kid. I was on milk all those years, so I had no maturity. I would encourage you to do a Bible study on the word son, S-O-N, in the Bible. And there's different translations in the Greek for son, and in our Bible, of course, it's just son, S-O-N. But there's a word for infant son, toddler son, adolescent son, fully mature son. And when you apply those words into the scriptures and you see, whoa, there's this maturation process. Submit to God, resist the devil, and he will flee. I didn't really understand submit to God. I thought, well, I believe in God, and I believe in Jesus, and I accepted Jesus as my Savior. Submit to God, how I read that would be, every thought I have needs to be submitted. Take that thought captive, have the mind of Christ, submit, be under God's authority. Don't agree with the spirit of fear, because that's not submitted to God. That's submitted to the enemy. Don't believe in the spirit of mammon or lack. You're going to lack food or money or resources, whatever, lack relationship. That just submitted to the kingdom of darkness. Spirit of performance. I have to perform to get you to love me. Spirit of man-pleasing. I have to do all this stuff to keep everyone happy with me. Those are not from the kingdom of light, from God, from the truth. So these thoughts that come in and you agree with them, that's not submitting to God. It's going to be hard to resist the devil and he will flee if you're not submitted to the truth. And I didn't know that. I didn't learn any of that. And what really, I would submit this to y'all to consider and do a Bible study on. Go look at this yourself, because this blew me away. And when I combine this understanding with all the medical stuff I just talked about with the water and your thoughts and your memories and the structure and all that, blew me away. So Jesus, go look up, when he's in the garden, he said, basically, I'll not probably quote it just right, spirit's willing, the flesh is weak, the soul is sorrowful unto death. Paul, may your body, soul, and sanctified through and through, body, soul, spirit. The word is sharper than a two-edged sword. I'd quoted that 1,000,000 times. I never quoted the next verse. Separating soul from spirit. Go back in Genesis and read in the garden, the whole story. It always kind of confused me. It said, if Adam could look upon the fruit of the tree and see that it was pleasing to his eye, but don't eat of that fruit or your eyes will be opened. And it's like, that's a little weird. I don't understand it, but it's okay. I'll just keep going. But then later it says he walked with God, communed with God in the cool of the day. He was in relationship with God. So here's how I see it now, as I did the Bible study of this whole concept of soul and spirit. Our spirit is in communion with the truth, the Holy Spirit. Spirit to spirit, it says in the scriptures. We commune spirit to spirit. So Adam, his spirit eyes were open because he communed with God, and his spirit eyes were opened. His flesh eyeball eyes were open because he could look and see it was pleasing to his eye. The fruit was pleasing to his flesh eyes. But when he took a bite, he disobeyed. He went out from under God's authority. He wasn't submitted to God. He did his own thing. Boom. Soul eyes opened. How I see this is that before that, his soul was right in line with his spirit. It was submitted to or in line with or in agreement with. There was no difference. But when he decided to go out on his own and do his own thing, boom, those eyes were opened. So this soul is where the battle's at. That's where the word will split the spirit and soul, sharper than a two-edged sword. So again, how I look at this, y'all, I'm submitting this to y'all and let the Holy Spirit show you. But these thoughts we have come in through different avenues. In my life, it's been my culture. I grew up in a small town, and I made perfect attendance in first grade, and I got in the newspaper. First 6 weeks, perfect attendance, Ben Edwards. Good job, Ben. Second 6 weeks, perfect attendance, all A honor roll. Arts, Craft, and Science Fair, first place ribbon. Good job, Ben. Soccer trophy, basketball, National Junior Honor Society, yada, 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 medical school graduation, performance. Our culture says you're good and lovable and acceptable if you perform to this standard of the world. Culture. Family, tradition. My granddad's never told me, you need to be a small town country doctor and do it all just like I did for me to love you. They never said that. But just this sneaky thought came in. I have 2 uncles that are doctors, my great-grandfather, great-great-grandfather. My dad's not, but lots of doctors. And it's just kind of naturally, this thought can come in. You need to be a doctor, not only a doctor, a small town country doctor, and blah, blah, blah. Generational. There's others. For me, generational, family tradition, culture were these portals of entry. The spirit, I did not give you the spirit of fear. Our battle's not flesh and blood, spiritual forces of evil in the heavenly realms, principalities. There are spiritual forces of evil, Scripture says. Satan fell, a third of the angels fell with him. The spirit of fear is a demonic spirit in the heavenly realms. Your battle's not against flesh and blood. Don't be scared of your neighbor who's sick or anything else. Don't be scared of anything. I didn't give you a spirit of fear. So if you're making a decision based off fear, then you've submitted to a spirit of fear. So these spiritual forces of evil just access through our soul. And I'm not talking about possession. You can't be possessed. Jesus possesses you, bought and paid for. You're possessed. I'm talking about tormenting. I've had thought, I can't leave Post Texas because everyone's going to be mad at me. I can't do integrative, functional, holistic, natural quackery medicine because my granddad's, what are they going to think? I can't make the leap because I won't make money. I can't leave this job that I hate and it's stressing me out to the max because it has good health insurance and a good salary. I hear that all the time. It's your peace pillar, sir. You're eating good, you're hydrating well, you're working out well, you are stressed to the max. What's stressing you? My job. Why are you in the job? I need the money and the health insurance. All the time I hear it. The enemy gets us through these ways. If you are being who you're, here's, again, this is my testimony. I'm not saying I know it all or figured it all out, but here's what clicked for me. Before you're in your mama's womb, he knew you, set you apart, put a call on your life. That call is without recall, can't be taken out of you. And he gave you gifts to support the call. So you have talents and gifts that will support you in your calling. This is a bullseye, target thing. So here's how I think about it. If I'm hitting this bullseye, I'm boom. I'm thinking my thoughts are lined up with God. The kingdom is not about food and drink, but righteousness, peace, and joy. And how I think about righteousness is right standing, right alignment. I am lined up with the way God sees me, my identity, the way God sees the whole world, the way God sees everybody in the world, his whole creation, how he sees this circumstance, this relationship, this job, all of it. Here's God's point of view. Is my thinking lined up with that? And how, again, I look at it is Satan knows if each one of us as the body of Christ is walking in perfect alignment with who God made us to be, that call he put in our life, and we're all functioning in our call, the body will function like it's supposed to here in the earth and represent God to the world, and it'll be awesome. So Satan, how I see it again, my interpretation, Satan wants us off the bullseye. He wants us to hit right over here, or right over here, or right over here. And I probably should have run this by a preacher before, but the thoughts come to me, and this could be totally off. I'll submit it. That maybe Satan doesn't even really care if I'm saved. I think he cares mostly he knows I'm saved, but he's going to torment me so much to keep me from hitting the bullseye. He knows if the body of Christ is walking in who they are, and we're all hitting the bullseye, each one of us, the big toe and the ears and the heart, and everybody's doing what we're supposed to be doing, then we function here in the earth. Come, let us go up to the mountain of the Lord. Perhaps they'll teach us their ways. This body of Christ is functioning in the earth so amazing, the world will come and ask. So how do we function like that? We're hitting the bullseye. How does Satan get us off? Spiritual forces of evil in the heavenly realms through a thought. Do you agree with this thought? Satan has no authority at all until we agree with that spirit of fear, spirit of performance, spirit of man-pleasing, spirit of whatever. We agree with that thought. I can't go be this doctor because I can't make money, or I can't pay my bills, or what do the people think about me? If I stayed submitted to that thought, that demonic force, I'd still be in Post Texas, seeing 40 patients a day. And who knows what my fight or flight and health would be like, and my marriage would be like, and all that. A little side note, in archery, if you measure the distance between where your arrow hits, it's called sin, that measurement. So when I grew up, I was trying to always be good. Don't lie. Don't cheat. Don't steal. Do the 10 Commandments. Be good. All your fruit, do good stuff. And then as I started going through this, it's like, whoa. The sin isn't stealing someone's purse. That's the fruit that came out of the real sin was a thought, God can't provide for me. I got to steal her purse. And it produced this thing. You would say that's the sin, stealing. But the sin now I'm seeing is, no, it's a thought. It's not lined up with the truth. So now I go around trying to consider in my day, my decisions I'm making, the way I'm acting, who I'm talking to, how I'm talking, what I'm thinking. Is it the truth? Is it lined up with the truth, lined up with God's word? Did the Holy Spirit tell my spirit this, or am I acting out of my soul, influenced by a demonic influence through family tradition or culture or whatever? So soul, spirit was huge, huge for me. Totally foreign concept growing up. There's a book called Soul Care that kind of goes into this some. So what I'm trying to do is just bring this all wrapped around to the end. A farmer is going to have a hard time, a conventional farmer is going to have a hard time transitioning to a kingdom agricultural model because the spirit of mammon's going to come say, you can't make money doing that. The spirit of man-pleasing is going to come say, all the guys down at the cotton gin are going to laugh at you or whatever. There's all these voices. It's hard. That's why we have to know the truth and put the truth in us. And when the demons come and whisper in our ears, we don't submit to them. But if we could do kingdom agriculture, do kingdom healthcare, do kingdom education, do kingdom commerce, do kingdom everything, do it God's way. Imagine how, it says even the rocks cry out. Creation groans for the sons of God to step up, and sons is neither male nor female, slave or free. We're spirit beings housed in the flesh, so when it says son, it's all of us. But even creation cries out for us to stand up, rise up, and walk in the truth and make decisions. So, I don't have it all figured out. I'm just giving you my testimony through all this. Here's where I've landed and how it relates to health, and it's all intertwined, and we shouldn't need a doctor. God made our bodies perfect if we will steward it, but it takes a farmer. It takes the right water. It takes a job that you're doing what you're supposed to do. I know if you are being who God called you to be, that call He put on your life before you're in your mama's womb and He knew you and set you apart for this thing, if you're doing that thing, He's obligated to meet your needs. You will have a roof over your head, you will have clothes on your back, and you will have food in your mouth. And He will give you what you need in the moment you need it. If you're doing what He's called you to do, it's His obligation to provide, and He will. It's what He did for me. That's a whole nother story. He's provided beyond my wildest dreams, and I'm not rich. I pay my bills. We have a budget. That's how we keep our prices low at our clinic. I know what I need, blah, blah, blah. But I'm just saying He provided a clinic building for me when I needed one. He provided a nurse practitioner a month ago when I really needed one. He brings the things that I need when I'm doing and walking in what I'm supposed to be doing. I don't do it perfectly. Obviously, I'm human. I've struggled. My wife helps me. We complete each other, and she really helps me stay on track in a lot of areas. We have goats. She has goats, but we're one, so we have goats. And those goats can test my peace pillar. And she told me, Ben, we're keeping these goats because they keep you humble. And they help you with your peace pillar. And keep your head from getting too big and all this stuff. We're probably almost out of time, 15 minutes. So I hope you see we need to try to steward our health and live in a manner in alignment with God's original intent. I'm not claiming to know all of God's original intent, every single part of your life and health and all that, but pretty much nutrition, hydration, movement, and peace is a core that I felt like early on when I didn't really know what I was doing, and I was going to all these conferences with really smart integrative doctors up on the stage talking, and it was so complicated. And I felt like God just said, it's not complicated. Yes, the body's complex, but it's not complicated. 200 years ago, nobody knew what a mitochondria was. Nobody knew about the double helix DNA. Nobody knew about a microbe in the gut that the infant calls forth and sends to the mom's breast milk, and then it will protect it from breast cancer. No one knew any of this. And they were healthy. It's the basics. Get the basics down. The world is trying to tear us apart, divide us, and complicate our life and get us all busy and all this stuff. So hopefully you can see how it just all comes together, and it is pretty simple. Now, if you are chronically diseased, you have some big, massive disease, most people that come see us, they're super sick, been super sick for a long time, been everywhere, tried everything, and we do use integrative modalities, the ozone and different things, to help push back the inflammation some, but really, that's just to give them a temporary relief, because that's not going to fix them. Even if they think, man, that was awesome, and I'm not hurting at all, or whatever their symptom was, that fixed me. We'll tell them, no, it didn't. It's a temporary fix. You've got to get the foundation. And I'm confident you will, at the minimum, reduce your risk of chronic disease in the future, and at the maximum, your current problems will improve greatly or go away possibly. I'm not saying everybody will be well. There can be a thorn in our side for a reason. But everybody at 27 years old getting sick, I didn't even put up the average pharmaceutical numbers for kids and 20 and 30 and 40 by decade, the number of meds we're all on. Number 3 leading cause of death in America is medication. Pharmacopoeia is witchcraft in the Bible. So be careful, be discerning. COVID, real quick. It's a huge topic and controversial and all of that. I could show you a ton of data, ton of graphs. Maybe I'll show you one if you're walking in fear. Yes, it's a virus. It's a real virus. Was it manipulated according to the top scientists like Luc Montagnier, HIV, Nobel Prize winner, and 15 other Luc Montagners? There's no way it naturally jumped from a bat to humans. It started as a bat, but it, according to them, the experts of virology, who don't appear to me to be influenced by anything, it was a mutated virus in the lab. Now, whether that was for a beneficial thing or a not beneficial thing, biological warfare versus let's try to figure out coronaviruses to help mankind, I don't know. But so when you have a manipulated virus, a little tricky. It may not act exactly like what we're kind of used to with coronaviruses or influenza, any respiratory virus. But here is deaths per million. This is for Sweden, but it's comparable throughout the world. This is going back to, I think that's 1882 maybe. And through the 1900s, early 1900s. These are the seasonal spikes in death from respiratory. Usually it's a respiratory, like Spanish flu in 1918. And this is deaths per million, so it's standardized for the population. And as you can see, every year we have, usually it's influenza, we think it's influenza. Every year we have respiratory viruses and pneumonias that kill people, is what I'm saying. CDC, every year, takes about 100,000 swabs, flu swabs. People think they have the flu, they go to the doctor, get influenza swabbed. CDC has testing centers set up all throughout the United States, and they collect about 100,000 or so. And they take them out to their lab, and they actually test what all viruses. And over the last 20 years, on average, over 20 years, the average, 15% of the people have influenza. 85% of the people with a bad cough and ache and fever and all that have a different virus, some other viruses. There's lots of coronaviruses, lots of rhinoviruses and RSV and parainfluenza and adenovirus and different influenzas and all that. So that every year it can be up and down. Here's coronavirus. So yeah, I mean, it's a spike. It's a definite spike more than the last few years. But I mean, this is, 2008. There's a spike higher than corona. Here's a couple more. There's way back in the 90s, there are 2 big spikes. So yeah, if you're compromised and your mitochondria is not good and you're comorbid, you have other medical problems and you're elderly, and yes, it can cause an overwhelming inflammatory response and you can die from it, no doubt. There's people I know dying from it. But perspective is all I'm trying to say with that slide. Fear from the get-go. I made a video on COVID early on when it became clear, when I started listening to some epidemiologists, Nobel Prize winning epidemiologists out of Stanford, and it became clear that this is pretty similar to an influenza, the death rate. Immediately I could see the spirit of fear. This is totally spirit of fear is overcoming everybody. And now for sure, 9 months or however far into it, it's hard to see how much of this death is from our response to it via the goggles of the spirit of fear and how we're making decisions, the way we're treating or not treating patients. The other, patients not getting into their doctor because of X, Y, or Z, because of COVID, all the unrelated deaths. So even this death spike, how much of that is from our response? And there's a lot of data showing that the number of deaths because of our response to it is probably going to be higher than the actual COVID itself. One other thing I want to highlight, and I'll take questions on COVID. I don't want to go through the whole talk. Dr. Peter McCullough, probably the number one message for today, and I'm not even supposed to talk about masks or I'll get censored. I want to just show you a picture of McCullough's. Dr. Peter McCullough, he's the vice chair of internal medicine at Baylor, Dallas. He's a cardiologist. I'll just tell you. Dr. McCullough, we're on a group text with a bunch of doctors around the country, and there are doctors who've been treating COVID since April in these different places where it's had an outbreak. Dr. Brian Tyson, Southern California, right on the border of Mexico, El Centro, California. He runs an urgent care center, and he's treated over 2,000 patients. And these are, what he said, a lot of comorbidities, a lot of diabetes, a lot of obesity, and 0 deaths out of 2,000 patients. There's Dr. Armstrong, Robin Armstrong, down in Pasadena, Texas. He's a medical director for nursing homes. Had an outbreak at one of his nursing homes. Don't quote me on the numbers. It's something like 38 of his residents tested positive. He put them all on an outpatient treatment protocol. 37 out of 38 lived and go to the hospital. One of them, who was very old and had many conditions, like a nursing home patient would, one died out of 38. Multiple doctors around the country reporting the same thing. Dr. Peter McCullough started looking at the literature, and now there's over 150 published and peer-reviewed studies from around the world, hydroxychloroquine, zinc, and azithromycin triple therapy, if given early in the outpatient setting, reduces hospital mortality, I can't find the slide, to under 3%. Most doctors' offices, according to this group text, this isn't published data, but this was the question this morning after Dr. McCullough's testimony at the Senate 2 days ago. He sent out this question to the group. What percentage of doctors' offices are not treating COVID-19? Like their patients call, I'm sick with flu-like symptoms, and they say stay home, quarantine, or maybe get tested and quarantine, but don't come here, and if you get worse, go to the hospital. That's pretty much has been the standard answer since early in this, even though the data started coming out pretty quickly, and now it's, to quote Dr. McCullough, it's a tsunami of evidence. Like overwhelming, can't argue it, hundreds, over 150 studies. If you start this early, you decrease hospitalization and mortality. And guys, I'm just saying, under 50 years old, you don't have to do anything according to Dr. McCullough's protocol. Under 50, no comorbid conditions, it's flu, go home. Eat some chicken noodle soup. That's what the stats say. That's what the data says. And his protocol calls for nothing under 50. And above 50, especially if you've got comorbid conditions, do the triple therapy and you'll decrease hospitalizations greatly. And we're not doing it. Doctors are not doing it. It should be promoted on your news, on your radio, on your billboards. I see billboards to wear a mask. Where are the billboards with 150 published studies showing significant decrease in hospitalization and death if you'll do triple therapy early? I don't see it anywhere. I don't see any official, public health official, private health official, hardly besides this group text. There's no media, there's no outcry, there's no anything. There's a doctor on the group text, Dr. Marble, Ben Marble, myfreedoctor.com, I'm pretty sure it's his website. He just built this website like a month ago or 6 weeks ago to treat these patients via telemedicine whose doctors won't treat them. You get online, you sign up, get a telemedicine visit, and he treats you over the phone for free. I mean, he says you can donate if you feel like you can donate, and of course people donate, so he's getting paid. And there's other doctors doing this because the doctors' offices are just saying, no, we can't treat you. So there's a major, major issue. And Dr. Peter McCullough told the Senator Ron Johnson out of Wisconsin, who's the chairman of this committee that they called, he said there's academic fraud, academic malfeasance, academic malpractice, there's total corruption. There's no reason this shouldn't be widely distributed. In Honduras, it's over the counter. In Honduras, they're mailing out and giving out door to door, basically, little pamphlets, flyers with this protocol. Hydroxychloroquine, azithromycin, zinc, ivermectin. Here it is. Here's how you take it. It's available at every store over the counter. In Greece, it's mandatory first-line treatment. You have to, this is what you prescribe. But in Australia, if a doctor prescribes it, they face up to 6 months in jail. In Canada, it's illegal. What a disconnect. There's so much politics, money, power, and identity. It's everywhere. People are tempted in these three areas, and they take the bait, and it gets them way, way, way off. So number one, of course, don't fear. Your body's capable and strong. If you steward it, nutrition, hydration, movement, and peace especially, your body will handle it. Don't worry about it. Even standard Americans who are eating the processed grain, sugar, and vegetable oil, and their mitochondria is blowing out so much black smoke, their cell membranes are so inflamed. Even in that, here's the data. It's the mortality rates in standard American. Now, I mean, I'm not trying to minimize it. There are the elderly, there are people with diabetes and obesity and disease, and they're going to be a lot more prone. I mean, if you're above 80, for sure, it's nothing to mess around with. I'm mainly trying to drive home the point that medicine has gotten way off, the profession of medicine has gotten way, way, way off real quickly. We've totally bought into this is a crazy Ebola 50% death rate where the world's ending, and we won't even see patients. I mean, it's outrageous, really. There's another protocol. There are doctors out there, ICU, pulmonology, critical care experts, vitamin C IV, thiamine, which is a B vitamin, IV, heparin, which is a blood thinner, and methylprednisolone, which is a steroid. If a patient presents to the hospital, you start all these immediately. Even in the ER, start those. And now they've added an ivermectin to it. Ivermectin just stops viral replication quickly. That's the protocol. And they've reduced, now this is in old folks who are already showing up at the hospital, sicker than dogs, dying kind of. Start them on it. You reduce ICU admissions, you reduce ventilator, and you increase increase the survival rate substantially with this simple protocol. And I talked to a doctor in my area who's in the ICU treating patients because I had a family call from old family from Post. Their mom was in the ICU, and they were desperate and wanted me to do anything I could, which I told them I can't really do anything. I'm not in the hospital, but got in contact with the doctor, and he said, I'm aware of the protocol. So I thought, all right, that's good. And come to find out later from the daughter that they were giving her vitamin C tablets a couple times a day It's a totally different effect. IV, high dose vitamin C versus oral. I'm just like, this is a published protocol from Vanderbilt and all these amazing institutions where these guys are using it. So it's a frustrating time, but again, seeing it from a heavenly point of view, have our spiritual goggles of truth on, and see it for what it is, and it's the enemy dividing. Because the body of Christ is coming more and more to the truth, I believe. We're going to start rejecting this demonic influence, and there will be a remnant come forth that is lined up with the truth. And I'm not saying be rebellious or don't obey your government or whatever, unless the Holy Spirit tells you to do that. I'm just saying the enemy knows it's coming. We're coming. We're maturing as a body, so he's coming harder with all these lies and deception. And the spirit of fear, obviously, is the mechanism with our health in particular, the mechanism. So don't submit to that spirit of fear. How I read Scripture, our days are numbered. God's in charge. He's sovereign. Before he put you in your mama's womb and the day he calls your spirit home, God knows that. God's in charge of that. I can't control that. Nobody can control that. We control the health span, but not the lifespan. So my day's set. And that day, if I get run over by a truck or COVID kills me or something else, whatever, I can't die. I'm a spirit. My spirit's going on. The flesh will fall over dead. But that day's set. I don't need to walk in fear. Jesus defeated that spirit of death and fear. He defeated all the demonic spirits. So let's submit to the truth. Walk in the truth. Be who God made us to be.